Chapter 637. 0? Roland asked tentatively. She rolled her eyes, bent over to put the plate on the coffee table, and then sat down cross-legged. What are you doing there? Aren't you going to have breakfast? The little girl's voice was soft and immature. Her figure was slender and she wore a light blue dress with white stockings. Her feet were almost the size of his palm. She was completely different from the crazy pure witch who clamored that she would never let him go. But since she did not deny this name, it meant that she admitted that she was 0. What should I do? Kill her. Now that she has the body of a little girl, it is impossible for her to tear me apart with her bare hands like an extraordinary, right? Roland first went into the kitchen, took a fruit knife from the knife rack and hid it at his waist, and then slowly walked to the coffee table. He saw a fried egg and 2 fried dough sticks on his plate, well, one more than hers. The outer ring of the egg was golden, the edges were slightly burnt, and the egg white in the middle was slightly swollen, revealing a touch of orange. Obviously, it was a perfect flowing egg. 0 skillfully picked up her chopsticks and quickly stuffed her fried egg into her mouth. She then grabbed a fried dough stick and began to gnaw on it. What were you doing yesterday? Were there cockroaches on the ceiling? No. I thought it was a little dirty, so I wanted to wipe it. Roland casually made up an excuse. Really? She looked up at the ceiling. Didn't you know how to use a cloth hanging from a clothes fork to wipe it? It didn't work well, but it's finally clean now. He coughed twice. Did you do this? Uncle, is your head all right? 0 finally showed a worried look. Haven't I been the one to do everything since I came here? Since I came here. Then where were you before? Roland opened his mouth, but finally did not ask. Obviously, if he continued asking, she would suspect his identity. 0 quickly finished her breakfast and put her hand in front of him. Money to buy groceries. Ah. There are almost no groceries in the fridge. I have to go to the market today. How can I buy groceries without money? A junior high school student actually knows this. Roland subconsciously searched his body, but did not find his wallet. Ah. In the second drawer of your nightstand, 0 sighed. He went back to his bedroom and found a shriveled wallet in a drawer. He opened it and saw that there were only $300 and a few lottery tickets. How much do you want? Roland returned to the living room. 20. I can't carry any more than that. Roland didn't feel bad spending other people's money, so he handed her a 50 yuan bill. Save the extra for next time. 0 looked at him strangely and put the money into her purse. Your hand. Roland noticed that there were 2 band-aids wrapped around the man's fingers. I pricked myself when I was picking up glass shards. It's nothing serious. Of course, it would be better if you didn't throw things around. She shrugged, picked up her bag, and walked towards the door. I'm going to school. I won't be back in the afternoon. You can wash the dishes. Wait, isn't it summer vacation now? Of course it's tutoring. 0 put on her shoes and poked her head out from behind the door. Uncle, if your head still hurts, you should go to the hospital. Don't do this kind of stupid thing again. After half a minute, Roland walked out of room 0825, leaned over the railing and looked down. 0's figure soon appeared in his field of vision. Her white hair was always particularly eye-catching, but the passers-by seemed to be used to it. No one turned around to look at her. She waited downstairs for a while until the other 2 silly girls with backpacks ran up to her. Then the 3 of them disappeared into the alley together. Did she make friends here? Roland rubbed his forehead. This dream is too absurd. What should I do next? Should I follow her? He didn't believe that 0 could really simulate a complete city. Just as Roland turned around to look for the key in his room, his body suddenly stiffened and he stood still. He saw a pretty woman walking towards him. She had long, light gray hair and raised eyebrows. Her lips and nose were somewhat similar to Tilly's, but she had a coldness and arrogance that kept people thousands of miles away. He had never seen her before, but the memory in Prince Roland's mind clearly told him that she was his sister, Princess Garcia of Greycastle. Garcia Wimbledon. Roland subconsciously reached for the fruit knife at his waist. Get out of the way. The woman showed a disgusted expression. I want to go over. You don't know me. He was greatly surprised. Pfft, the woman sneered. Why should I know you? You dyed your hair the same color as mine, and you want to get close to me? Roland stared at her and slowly stepped aside. You're Garcia, right? The woman's face became gloomy. Although I don't know where you heard my name, I warn you, you'll suffer if you keep pestering me. She stretched out her right hand and clasped her fingers one by one. Her joints made a cracking sound as if she had been trained in fighting. When she returned to her room and slammed the door shut, Roland pretended to stroll around and walked over to take a look. The room number was 0827, and it was next door. Looking at the security doors lined up along the walkway further away, he suddenly had a horrifying thought. How many residents are there in this apartment building? Anyway, the length of the public corridor is amazing. I can't even see the end of the corridor when I stand in front of the door of room 27. Once this thought arose, it was difficult to suppress it. He returned to his room as fast as he could and found the key. After confirming that the door could be opened, he locked the door and ran toward the increasing number of rooms. The corridor under his feet was as long as a 400-meter-long straight track. Panting, Roland came to the end of the corridor near the stairwell. The last room number was 0899. This is incredible. Who would put nearly 100 apartments in one floor of a tube-shaped apartment building? According to the style of the 70s and 80s, a row of more than 10 apartments is already considered a large scale. Roland then climbed up the stairs. The iron handrails were mostly made of iron, and the green paint on the surface had almost peeled off. Obvious rust and dust could be seen. Numerous small advertisements were pasted in the corridor, revealing the distinctive characteristics of the times. This kind of psoriasis should have disappeared in the big cities long ago. The top floor was the 22nd floor. There was no nameplate on the security door at the end, and even the window was not open. He checked the rooms one by one until the first number appeared in front of him, 2245. There were a total of 2,124 households in the entire apartment building. Over the years, I've devoured thousands of soldiers, including an extraordinary. You can't beat me. Zero's words from the life and death fight on the rooftop came to his mind again. Are all the people living here the losers of the Battle of Souls? Roland could not help but be dumbfounded by this speculation. Chapter 638. After climbing more than a dozen floors in one breath, Roland felt his feet ache when he relaxed. There was no elevator in this old-fashioned building. Even in his dream, he was glad that he did not appear on the top floor. There was no doubt that it was Zero who caused all this, but it was not entirely Zero, because no one would take revenge on him in this way. The only purpose of painstakingly creating this strange dream was to let him witness her failure. Not only was she deprived of her memory as a pure witch, but she also became a defenseless junior high school student. For a moment, many evil ideas popped up in Roland's mind. Based on Zero's current appearance, no matter what he did to her, she would not be able to resist. Could this also be considered revenge? It could only be said that Zero did something at that time to make the incredible recasting of her memory, but the final result was not what she wanted to see. If this extraordinarily large tube-shaped building was a faithful reflection of Zero's memory, then it was just a building. In the distance, the rising and falling skyscrapers and the ceaseless flow of vehicles and pedestrians on the street were obviously his memory, a soul from the modern world. Zero and the person she devoured were integrated into this dream as a modern person, which meant that her attempt had completely failed. This was a more reasonable inference. What about himself? Roland slowly walked downstairs while thinking about this question. He did not belong here, at least not in this loser's building. A very obvious feature was that he still had a complete memory, knew that he was in a dream, and could leave this place at any time. Of course, next he would have to order a more convenient falling tool. Last time when he fell from the sofa and hit his head, he could still feel a dull pain this time, which meant that the dream had reached a level of authenticity. If that was the case, how far could it go in terms of richness? Was it all-encompassing or just an empty shell? Roland returned to room 0825 and carefully examined the residence again. It was a standard 1-bedroom and 3 living rooms without a balcony. The 3 single rooms were Roland's bedroom, Zero's bedroom, and a utility room. The storage room was filled with large items, such as an old-fashioned bicycle without a flywheel, a sewing machine, a rusted iron door, and so on. They probably wouldn't be worth much even if they were sold as scrap. Roland then walked to the door of Zero's bedroom. There was an obvious notice on the door, no unauthorized entry. However, this kind of warning was nothing to Roland. He unceremoniously pushed open the door, and a faint fragrance floated into his nose. In the small room, the furniture was arranged neatly. Even the bed was folded. The clean table and floor were spotless. It was hard to believe that a middle school student could do this. After Roland walked around, his eyes were quickly attracted by a cartoon diary placed at the corner of the desk. She actually had the habit of keeping a diary. This was a good opportunity to learn more about Zero's past. For him, peeking at a little girl's diary in his dream did not give him any psychological pressure. Roland picked up the pink book and found a plastic lock on the side. However, this kind of thing was not difficult for him at all. The function of the plastic lock was to increase the psychological comfort of the child, and it had no function to prevent peeking. Roland found 2 toothpicks, inserted them into the keyhole, and picked the lock after a while. He turned to the first page. Although the handwriting on the paper was immature, there were few ink spots and alterations. Obviously, she was quite serious when writing these things. February 16th, because the school moved, I was sent to a different family. The owner is called Roland, an uncle who is not very particular. He works in a bar and often sleeps during the day, goes out at night, and comes back in the early hours of the morning. He always has an unpleasant smell of alcohol on him. I really don't want to live here, but my family says that he asks for the least boarding fee and food. They don't allow me to say one more word, or they will send me to the countryside. What the hell is this background? Roland could not help but grit his teeth. Ever since he was young, the number of times he went to a bar could be counted on one hand, not to mention working there. But the dream itself was an unreasonable place. It often spliced many unrelated fragments together, and it didn't feel strange at all in the dream. Thinking of this, he could not be bothered to argue with the dream. February 27th, school started. Uncle Roland seems to have lost his job. He looks very dispirited. His dinner became instant noodles, and I had to buy them. March 2nd, recently all my pocket money has been spent on instant noodles. This can't go on. The magazine said that 12 years old is the period when the body is growing, and we must ensure adequate nutrition. I have to negotiate with my uncle. If I get beaten up, I will endure it. I don't want to go to the countryside. March 3rd, he agreed to my proposal. That's great. Every month he gives me a portion of my living expenses to buy fresh food. However, as long as I am not at school, I have to make all 3 meals. Who is taking care of who? Why do I feel that he should give me a higher salary? Whatever, I often have to do these things at home anyway. I'm used to it. June 8th, after coming to the new city for 3 months, I have gradually adapted here. I have made many friends and my grades are the best in my class. Although Uncle Roland is very careless and always slovenly, he is actually not a bad person. At least he has never beaten me. Unfortunately, he still has not found a job. It looks like he is about to give up. This is not a good sign. It is impossible to support him and me with the living expenses from home alone. I have to think of a way to help him. June 22nd, it is so hard to earn money. I drew some cartoons and sold them to my classmates in cram school. In the end, I only earned 15 yuan. This is not even enough for 2 days of food. Right, was my tone with my uncle a little too casual recently? After all, he is an adult. It is a little rude, but I can't help it. Is this the rebellious phase? June 25th, God, I was scared to death today. As soon as I entered the door, I saw Uncle Roland fall from the chair. Luckily, there was a sofa underneath. Putting the chair so high, is he trying to commit suicide? It is so infuriating. If he hurt himself, won't it be even more difficult to find a job? Forget it, I will ask him tomorrow what is going on. It only took Roland half an hour to finish reading the whole diary, leaving out the unimportant details. She also had a general understanding of the reason why Zero lived in the same house with her. The dream world seemed to have fabricated a background that suited everyone's identity in the modern era. This was undoubtedly an extremely complicated structure, and it was probably impossible for him to complete it by himself. It was no wonder that he had been unconscious for almost 2 months after the soul duel. When he locked the diary and put it back in its original position, Roland could not help but be startled. There was a stack of books on the desk, which seemed to be the little girl's teaching materials. He swallowed and reached out to move all the textbooks over. The first was language, the second was ideological and moral education. When he flipped to the third book, his breathing became a little faster. That was the chemistry textbook used by middle school students. Its content was very simple. There were very few words and most of them were illustrations. At first glance, it looked like 100,000 Ys. However, when Roland turned to the last page, a long folded page fell out. Chapter 639. After waking up from the dream world, Roland was wide awake. He jumped out of bed excitedly, put on his coat, and went to his office. He took out a few pieces of white paper and began to write down some missing knowledge in the periodic table of elements and elementary chemistry. After entering the dream world twice, he had figured out some general rules. First of all, the time in the dream world was not the same as the time in reality. This was easy to understand. Usually, when he dozed off, he would dream of a long series of content. Perhaps when the senses of sight, hearing, touch, and other senses were provided internally, the brain could reach a very high reaction speed. For example, he had been active in the dream world for about 8 hours until 3 in the afternoon. Before Zero came back, he used a ladder to fall from his bedroom. It was still late at night, and the moon was hanging high above his head. It would probably be another 4 to 6 hours before the sunrise. Second was the activity of his brain. Perhaps because the dream world was too realistic, Roland found that his actions in the dream world did not mean that he was asleep. This was a very tricky problem. He had to deal with government affairs during the day and earn money at night. How could he be busy for 24 hours a day? He suddenly felt that he was about to become the model worker of Neverwinter, and the most diligent one. However, Roland had not tried to sleep in the dream world. If he could take advantage of the time difference and rest in the dream world, it would undoubtedly greatly improve his work efficiency. Third was the dream world itself. It was completely different from the usual dreams, clear, stable, and had its own set of rules. Without a doubt, this was partly caused by Zero. She had made the dream world into a new world, and Roland only knew a little about it. Did it have a boundary? What fragments did it integrate? How much buried or even forgotten information could he find in it? After waiting for dawn, Roland had breakfast and summoned all the department heads of City Hall to the castle's reception hall. In addition to understanding the changes and progress of the city over the past month, he had another important purpose, which was to formulate the strategic goals for the next stage. At present, the threat of the church had been removed. The next most important thing was undoubtedly to prepare for the upcoming battle of divine will. Roland set his sights on the other kingdoms. Ah. You mean, not only do we have to recruit people from the territories of Grey Castle, but we also have to rob people from the kingdom of Everwinter and the kingdom of Wolfheart? Bhairav wiped his forehead. Your Majesty, this is a big project. The news of the church's heavy losses will definitely spread throughout the continent. It's unknown how much control the holy city of Hermes can maintain over the kingdom of Everwinter and the kingdom of Wolfheart. As for those nobles who joined the church, when the situation changes, it wouldn't be surprising for them to bite back. Roland said in a low voice, this is a good opportunity for us. Whether we use the golden dragon to tempt them or force them to come to Grey Castle, everything will be fine. In this era where nationalism had yet to be awakened, there were almost no repercussions for forcefully recruiting people. As long as they could get their whole family involved, most people did not mind who they were working for. In the spring of next year, the seaport of Neverwinter will be opened. What you need to do is to formulate a recruitment plan, rent ships from the sea merchants of the fjords, and properly settle the people. Roland continued, I know the implementation of these policies will cost a lot of golden dragon, but no matter what, City Hall has to grit its teeth and complete it. Everyone here knows that the church is not the kingdom's ultimate enemy. This rapid population expansion plan seemed complicated and huge, but many of the details had already been rehearsed by City Hall. For example, for City Hall, who had sent emissary delegations to the Southern Territory and the Eastern region many times to recruit people, it was not a difficult task. As for the settlement part, City Hall had a complete set of regulations and rich experience. Today, City Hall of Neverwinter had become a reliable and mature administrative organization. The only part that he had not practiced was the shipping part. He planned to contact Thunder and Marjorie's Chamber of Commerce to help him complete it. By the way, to lighten your burden, I'll officially hire Miss Edith Kant to join City Hall as your adjutant. Roland paused. Whether it's in the Battle of Coldwind Ridge or in her performance in the advisor department, her ability is impeccable. I believe that with her help, you'll be much more relaxed. Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty, Bhairav said hurriedly. But I can also do this alone, I've already decided, Roland interrupted the director. Just do as I say. Then he looked at Scroll and said, education is also the focus of the next stage. How's the training of intermediate teachers going? So far, only Philin has passed the intermediate examination. Scroll shook her head. Your Majesty, I'm afraid this method won't work. I see. Roland was not surprised by the failure of the Ministry of Education. In the beginning, the junior teachers were all from the night class, and the content taught was limited to general reading and writing. Under the guidance of the Unified Teaching Plan and Scroll, they successfully completed the task. However, when the Ministry of Education continued to strengthen the teacher resources and wanted to train the knight to become an intermediate teacher, the problem arose. The only reason these nobles could read was that they had access to these things, but it did not mean that they were good at learning. The intermediate examination involved 3 major subjects, mathematics, physics, and chemistry, which could not be easily understood. Since it won't work, the new intermediate teachers will be selected from the students, Roland decided. In order to ensure that the students can continue to study, include the scholarship system in the New Year's financial plan. Scholarship. Scroll was stunned. Do you mean the reward system that was promoted in Longsong's stronghold? It's completely different. At that time, the reward system was to attract more people to participate in the study, while the scholarship was only for the top students. Roland explained, the purpose of the scholarship system is to allow outstanding talents to receive a salary comparable to that of ordinary workers during the study period, so that they will be willing to continue to study in the school. The reason was very simple. After passing the Universal Education Examination and obtaining a graduation certificate, most people would not consider further study, but find a job as soon as possible to support their families. Therefore, it was necessary for Roland to establish a special subsidy, that is, a scholarship, so that those who were good at learning could receive better training. At the beginning, you can set the reward line a little higher, so that about 20 or 30 students will be selected. With you and Philin teaching them, their learning speed should be much faster than that of the knight. After that, those who pass the intermediate examination will be hired as intermediate teachers, with a starting salary of 50 silver royals per month. Those who fail will not lose anything and can still apply for other jobs. Chapter 640. Your Majesty, the first few batches won't be a problem, but after that, we don't need so many middle-level teachers, do we? Barav asked. Barav looked a little disappointed, but most of his attention was still on the topic. Roland was quite satisfied with his mature performance. Middle-level teachers aren't the only place these people can go. In addition to receiving a higher level of education, researchers and managers will also be assigned to other production positions. They should not only know how to operate machinery, but also understand its principles. They should be able to train workers, maintain equipment, and even put forward suggestions for improvement. Roland counted on his fingers and said, "It's meaningless to have a large population. What the Ministry of Education needs to do is to turn them into industrial personnel as much as possible." Industrial personnel? Scroll repeated in a low voice. Do you mean engaged in production? You can understand it this way. He explained the idea that had been in his mind for a long time. Anyone who has received a primary education can be qualified as a worker. They are the most junior industrial personnel. This group of people determines the scale of the industry in Neverwinter. The more people there are, the bigger the industry will be. But it's not enough. City Hall can't manage so many things, so in the future, there should be 2 to 3 people who have received a secondary education in every 100 people. They can not only be used as workers, but also can be placed in management positions. The same is true for the senior educators. In this way, an organization that can replace itself and act according to City Hall's instructions will be formed. Education was the key to the reason why the population could become a dividend. At present, Neverwinter did not have enough resources to fully implement secondary and senior compulsory education. Roland did not have that much time to wait for talents to mature, so he simply used scholarships to select and train a group of capable people. As for the rest of the people, as long as they completed primary education and could read and write, they would be directly assigned to various production positions and become a screw in the rapid development of Neverwinter. I understand, Scroll replied. There's one more thing. Add ideological education to primary education. Roland tapped on the table. He could not help but recall the ideological and moral education textbook in his dream. The role of arming the mind in this era might be no less than that of a steam engine. I'll write a teaching plan for the specific content and give it to you. After seeing Scroll nod, he stood up and looked around at everyone present. In general, the main tasks of City Hall this year and next are to expand the population, develop education, and upgrade the scale of industries. Among these, the first 2 are the most critical, as they determine the upper limit of the development of Neverwinter and even the entire kingdom. I hope that before an even more terrifying and powerful enemy arrives, everyone can fulfill their responsibilities. For the king. All the officials stood up in unison. And for yourselves. Roland exhaled. That's all for today's meeting. By the way. Kyle Sichi, come to my office. The chief alchemist followed Roland to his office. As soon as he closed the door, he asked directly, Your Majesty, do you have any new ideas or products to produce? If not, I hope to return to the laboratory as soon as possible. You're still as impatient as ever. Roland could not help laughing. Sit down and take your time. I have something important to give you. After Kyle sat down with a doubtful look, Roland leisurely took a sip of tea and asked, How are the alchemists in King City doing recently? Not too good, not too bad. Except for chemical experiments, I don't have much contact with them. The chief alchemist frowned. Instead of asking me, you can ask them directly. This showed that the alchemist workshop of King's City still formed a small group. Although the many apprentices they brought with them were of great help to the chemical production, it was easy for them to overwhelm the local students in terms of reputation. Roland calmly changed the topic. Now that the production of the 2 acids and smokeless gunpowder has reached a considerable scale, and it will double in the future, I intend to formally separate this industry and let a new department manage it. He paused for a moment. Have you ever considered becoming the minister of the Ministry of Chemical Industry? I remember you mentioned it to me before, but... I'm sorry, Your Majesty, I can't leave the laboratory and those bottles and cans to do the trivial work of a manager. Kyle refused without hesitation. So my answer is still the same as before. Don't be in such a hurry to refuse. Roland shrugged. You devote yourself to chemical experiments because you want to explore its mysteries and don't want to waste your time on other things. What if I can help you understand chemistry more directly? Kyle Sichi could not help but be surprised. How? Roland took out a piece of white paper full of squares from a drawer and slowly unfolded it in front of him. It was the periodic table of elements that he had written down last night. This is... The old alchemist's eyes suddenly widened. He stretched out his trembling hands, as if he wanted to grab the table from the king's hand, but he was afraid that he would tear it up if he used too much force. Didn't you say, you've forgotten the blank space? I've remembered a lot of them recently. Roland pulled back the periodic table, so that the old man could only stare at him. The same is true for intermediate chemistry. This time, it won't be an incomplete volume. Your Majesty, Kyle was so excited that he only said half a sentence, but he immediately shut his mouth. Obviously, he had understood what the king meant. Yes, as the Minister of Chemical Industry, manage the entire chemical industry for me, and this periodic table of elements and the complete version of intermediate chemistry will be yours. Roland slightly raised the corner of his mouth. And you may have a chance to see advanced chemistry. Although the chief alchemist's love for chemistry was admirable, he was limited by the conditions and environment. No matter how hard he studied, his achievements could not exceed the level of high school chemistry. Now that he had the complete chemistry book, it was better to directly put the results in front of him. This way, he could not only save a lot of time to teach more people, but also effectively weaken the influence of the alchemist workshop of King City on the whole industry. Roland wasn't worried that Kyle didn't know anything about management. After all, to become the chief of Redwater City's alchemy workshop, basic organization and coordination skills were essential. It was just that, according to his temperament, he rarely cared about such trifles. I understand. Kyle hesitated for a moment and bowed deeply. I'll be the minister. Somehow, compared to using power to achieve his goals, Roland more and more liked the feeling of changing people's attitudes with an irresistible bargaining chip. Was this the legendary superior syndrome? In any case, this would be a win-win choice. Chapter 641. This is not like a prison, Isabella thought, if she did not look down at the shackles on her wrists and feet. Ever since she told them that the cage made of God's stone of retaliation was ineffective against her, she had been moved to an ordinary bedroom guarded by guards. After moving to the western region of Grey Castle, her cell had not changed much. It was neither damp nor cold, nor was there any rancid dirty water flowing freely. In the empty room, there was only a bed and a bench, and a small cubicle as a toilet. The windows were sealed with iron bars, but it did not prevent the warm sunlight from shining in. In general, it was much better than the secret prison of the pivotal secret agency. Isabella had thought that she would receive some normal treatment as a prisoner of war, especially since the outstanding appearance of witches was easy to attract extra covetous eyes. However, nothing happened. There were guards outside the door at all times, but no one sneaked into the room in the middle of the night, nor did they humiliate or beat her. Except for delivering her meals on time every day, they hardly said a word. The witch who claimed to be from the Union more than 400 years ago would often come to see her, accompanied by a blonde witch shrouded in the shadow of a hood. No matter what they asked, Isabella would answer truthfully. She even asked for a pen and paper from the two witches. When she had nothing to do, she would transcribe some secret history or demon literature that she had read in the temple library. During this period, there was no torture as she had expected. She could tell that the blonde witch wanted to make trouble for her, but every time she answered the questions in detail, the witch would leave with a cold face, which made her quite puzzled. Of course, Isabella did not think that these witches were naive enough to believe everything she said. Judging from the reaction of the two witches during the interrogation, at least one of them could detect lies. Was it possible that the blonde witch was waiting for her to lie? This was also what confused her. There were countless excuses to punish her, or there was no need to find one at all. Why bother? However, as the days passed, her heart also sank. It had been almost 2 months. Why hadn't Roland Wimbledon appeared? There could only be two answers. Either the king had not woken up yet, or he did not intend to see her at all. Either way, it was not good news for Isabella. Perhaps when she confessed everything she knew, what awaited her would be a sentence of death. Although she was willing to give up everything to fight against the demons and had no complaints about the result, waiting for death to approach still made her feel mentally and physically exhausted. Isabella sighed and dragged her shackles to sit on the edge of the bed. She picked up her quill and clumsily spread out a new piece of white paper on her lap. The sooner she finished what she remembered, the sooner she would be able to enjoy her release. At this moment, footsteps could be heard outside the house. The voices were a little chaotic. Clearly, there were more than 2 people. Isabella's heart trembled slightly. When the door was pushed open, she put down her pen and turned around. She found that in addition to the 2 witches that she usually saw, there was also a gray-haired man. If the information was correct, he should be the 4th prince of the Wimbledon family, the current king of Greycastle. Roland Wimbledon woke up. Or was he here to pass judgment on her? Isabella stood up and curtsied. "I thought you wouldn't come to see me," she said, pretending to be calm. "You're the Isabella that made the god's stone of retaliation I wear lose its effect. I didn't want to deliberately delay until now. It's just that I had a long dream and just woke up not long ago." The calm tone of the other party surprised her greatly, and the content of the story surprised her even more. "In the dream, I fought with the pure witch and finally won, but it wasn't like what she said, where the winner won everything, whether it was knowledge or skills." "That's impossible." Isabella could not help but blurt out. "Why?" Roland asked with great interest. "Can't it be that a man can't awaken as a witch, so he can't inherit everything from her? It has nothing to do with gender." She shook her head. "The spoils of war that the winner of the soul battlefield can obtain are memory and lifespan, which everyone has. But the unique ability of witches can't be absorbed, and magic power can't be increased out of thin air. Otherwise, Zero would have swallowed me long ago. In other words, only creatures with these 2 characteristics can be included in the soul battlefield." "You mean, there's a creature that she can't invade?" "Of course, animals without intelligence can't enter the soul battlefield," Isabella explained. "Even if they win, they can't understand the human memory. That could also be because of the different races. As far as I know, among the thousands of souls she swallowed, there were demons and demonic hybrids." She sighed. "But these things happened before I was born, and she mentioned it when I was chatting with her." The 3 people on the opposite side could not help but look at each other. "Demons and demonic beasts? Why didn't you tell me before?" the blonde witch asked. "Because this information will only increase your worries and won't help solve the problem," Isabella said slowly. Even Zero felt that the memory of a heterogeneous species was too crazy and would cause a great burden on her, so she didn't try anything similar after that. "That's a little interesting." The king did not show an expression of lingering fear. Instead, he raised the corner of his mouth. "By the way, did Zero ever mention to you what happens to the losers in the soul battlefield?" "Completely disappears, as if they never existed." "Is there no difference?" He raised his eyebrows. "For example, those who surrender voluntarily and those who fight to the death, the result is the same? No matter which one it is, it will disappear, but..." Isabella pondered and replied, "Zero seems to have said that the memories she absorbed are divided into 2 kinds." "Which 2 kinds?" Roland seemed to be particularly interested in this question. One kind is chaotic and has a residual consciousness, which will affect Zero herself, and the other kind is complete and placed there for her to look through. She paused. The former is more difficult to recall and easier to forget. At that time, she just mentioned it casually, so I didn't ask much. But it's the first time I've seen someone like you who doesn't accept a trace of memory at all. This time, the silence was longer. The king closed his eyes and did not speak for a long time, as if he was thinking about an extremely complicated problem, and his brows furrowed undisguisedly. After about a quarter of an hour, he let out a long sigh. I see. What did he figure out? Although Isabella was curious, she did not ask. She knew her identity. Chapter 642. Isabella lowered her head slightly and waited for the judgment. You should be grateful for your ability. It's not because it's special, but because it can't kill others directly. No matter how serious the crime is, even if you helped Zero attack me, you're just an accessory. Roland's voice was clear and calm. I can spare your life, but you have to atone for what you've done, just like other people who violate the law. For some reason, when she heard this, she felt a weight fall from her heart. She did not fear death, but she did not like it either. As long as you can defeat the demons, I'm willing to give you everything. The demons are the enemies of all human beings. Of course, I'll fight them to the end. But unlike the church, I won't destroy the potential of human beings in order to win the battle of divine will. And you have to change your habits in the church. Roland said slowly, there won't be any pure witches in the future. From now on, you're a witch who atones for your sins. Zero was wrong. Not only did he know the existence of the demons and the Union, but he was also prepared for the battle of divine will. Indeed, he is immortal, and he may pass away after a few decades. His beliefs will also collapse as he ages. But now, you have bestowed him with endless life, and the final hurdle has been overcome. The beloved child of the gods has been born. Thinking of this, Isabella knelt on the ground, dragging her anklet. Her long hair covered the ground. Yes, master. When she stood up again, Roland said, this isn't the holy city of Hermes, so you're not my exclusive servant, but a person who atones for your sins. Of course, I won't send you to the mines to mine for 20 years. What you need to do is to cooperate with Agatha in magic power research. She was stunned. That's all I need to do for him. During this period, I'll ask Vendi to arrange a new residence for you. You'll have to atone for your sins for 5 years. You can wear no shackles, but you'll only have limited freedom. In other words, except for your residence and Agatha's mage tower, you'll have to be under the surveillance of the Witch Union if you want to go anywhere else. Yes, I understand. By the way, are you sure there are no other witches in the Holy City? Roland asked. Isabella had answered this question several times since she had been captured. Isabella thought for a while and finally shook her head. For this decisive battle, Zero transformed all the useless new witches into the gods' punishment army, and basically all the useful ones were sent to the battlefield. There were still a large number of women in the monastery, but before the months of demons, the probability of them turning into witches was not high. Vanilla, Maggie, and I should be the only 3 people left in the church. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the room. The blonde witch stepped forward and unlocked her shackles. Isabella stared at her free hands in disbelief. Was this the final verdict? Not detained, toyed with, or worse. Did he really mean what he said? Your Majesty. She suddenly stopped him. I wonder how Vanilla and Maggie are now. They're in a better situation than you. Roland turned around and said, they were just influenced by the distorted education in the monastery and are far from crazy. If they can be corrected, they may join the Witch Union one day. As the 3 witches left, the door closed with a squeak. Is that so? Isabella completely relaxed. She lay on the wooden bed and felt the sunlight shining through the window. She squinted at the blue sky outside the iron railing, ignoring the glare of the light. What a nice day, she thought. Your punishment is too light. Nightingale complained when they returned to the office. She almost killed you. It was Zero, not her. Roland handed her a piece of dried fish. The latter took it with her mouth and said vaguely, that was also caused by her. Otherwise, the soul battlefield would not have been able to invade your body. But she really wanted to fight against the demons from the bottom of her heart, didn't she? Roland said carelessly. Since she didn't commit an unforgivable crime and I didn't suffer any real harm, let's deal with her this way. It can also serve as a warning to future generations. 1,000 golden dragon. What? It means propaganda. Roland coughed twice. With her as an example, more people can understand that as long as they don't cross the line, they can still have a chance to redeem themselves. After all, the demons are our ultimate enemies. In order to increase our leverage in the battle of divine will, it's best to let her redeem herself. Okay. Nightingale twitched her mouth. I'll keep an eye on her for you. Roland walked to the French window, still thinking about what Isabella had said. Zero's memory is divided into two types. The first type is messy and has residual consciousness, which will affect her. The other type is complete and placed there for her to look at freely. The former type is more difficult to recall and easier to forget. Is this the reason why Zero repeatedly tried to persuade me to surrender during the Battle of Souls? Those who chose to surrender would offer all their memories, and there would be no side effects. This was the only way to explain why she stopped at the crucial moment. Zero hoped that she would give up resisting so that she could obtain the complete details of her memory. This speculation was somewhat similar to his experience when he occupied Prince Roland's body. To be exact, Prince Roland's memory was like this. He could look through it at any time if he wanted to, just like a well-organized file cabinet. He didn't need to spend time to record them. When he wasn't looking at them, he could just throw them to the back of his mind. Even after more than a year, this part of the memory was still as complete as before. Prince Roland was killed by Garcia's hidden chess piece. If the dead had no consciousness, it would make sense to regard them as losers who surrendered. What if they had a strong will to resist? According to Isabella's description, this part of the memory contained residual consciousness, which would change Zero's thoughts, personality, and even beliefs. After she had devoured thousands of people, she had become a complex collection of consciousness, far different from her original self. In other words, she could not be regarded as the same person at all. Therefore, her way of revenge was likely to be to inject all these consciousnesses into her own thoughts. She would certainly be fragmented because of this, but Roland would no longer be Roland. In the chaotic memory storm, various consciousnesses would fight for dominance again, and she might have a chance to make a comeback. However, Zero did not expect that he was not a person of this era. In terms of the depth and breadth of information received, the amount of information a modern person absorbed in a day was equivalent to several months or even several years in ancient times. In the era of information explosion, he was reading and memorizing almost all the time. He kept what was useful and eliminated what was meaningless. This had become an instinct of his consciousness. As a result, all the memory fragments were swallowed and reorganized by the dream world, forming a seemingly strange new world. However, there was no way for him to verify these speculations. Zero lost all the things she had devoured and her original memory. She became a pure and flawless newborn and reappeared in the dream world. Chapter 643. But now, he was responsible for raising this newborn. When Roland got up from the bed, yawning, the ladder he used for falling was still on the side, and it was already bright outside the blinds. He was wearing clothes when he fell, but now he only had a pair of boxer briefs. Was this caused by the inertia of his subconscious? It seemed that the dream would continue for a while after he left, until he fell asleep normally, ensuring that every time he entered the dream, he would wake up just at the same time. This was too formalistic. He decided to leave at midnight this time to see if he could eliminate this unconscious action that was similar to sleepwalking. In addition, the sequela of not having enough sleep also came. Roland did not feel like a person who had just woken up. His eyes were dry, his forehead was swollen, and he could not help yawning. Including the time on the other side, he had not slept for more than 20 hours. Maybe he needed to take a nap later. He put on a short-sleeved shirt and walked into the living room, where he saw the petite figure again. "Why did you get up so early today?" Zero looked a little surprised. "I haven't started making breakfast." "Wait for me in the living room, I'll go now." It was obvious that she had just gotten up. Her long white hair was scattered messily on her shoulders, and a few strands of hair were curled up. She looked completely different from her usual nimble appearance. She was still wearing that light cyan dress and white stockings. If he remembered correctly, the little lass had not changed her clothes for 3 days. Judging from her clean and tidy bedroom, it was definitely not because she was lazy or didn't mind being dirty. It could only be that she did not have enough clothes to change into. Somehow, Roland suddenly felt a surge of sadness in his heart. Not only for her, but also for himself. Thinking of the 250 yuan in his wallet, he felt that it was inconceivable. One was the main cause of the dream world, and the other was the creator of the dream world. The two people who could be called the creator of the world had fallen into such a situation, which could not be described as tragic. He could not go on like this. Whether it was to buy books or explore this world, money was indispensable. He had to find a way to earn a stable income, or the 200 yuan was not even enough to take a taxi, excluding food and utilities. While Roland was thinking about how to make money, Zero was already busy. She quickly lit the stove, heated the pan with oil, broke the egg with one hand, and sprinkled the flowing egg liquid into the pan. Although she was not strong enough to shake the pan, the small spatula in her hand moved up and down, and the effect was not much worse than shaking the iron pan. With the sizzling sound of the hot oil, the tempting smell of the fried egg soon filled the living room. Due to the limited living expenses, there were not many changes to the breakfast. This time, 2 fried dough sticks and a fried egg were served, but Zero had one less fried dough stick for herself. "You bought the fried egg yesterday?" Roland took a bite and found that it was no longer so. "Of course," Zero muttered. The last batch of flour sold at the end of the night was especially cheap. Sometimes the boss would even give me the unfinished flour balls, so I could make several deep-fried dough sticks with them. He asked in surprise, "Are you like this when you're at home?" "Almost." The little girl shook her head and did not say much. It seemed that she did not want to talk about her family. After breakfast, she simply dressed, picked up her school bag and walked to the door. "As usual, Uncle, I won't be back at noon." "You wash the dishes." "Ah, go. Be careful on the way." Roland nodded. Zero could not help but be startled. After a while, she responded, closed the door and left. "Well, it's time to calculate my property." Roland returned to his bedroom, turned over the bedside table and wardrobe from head to toe, and sorted out all his belongings. First was his wallet. In addition to 200 yuan, there was an ID card and a bank card. It was as shabby as one could imagine. Of course, he directly threw the expired lottery tickets into the trash. Even if he could win, it was already past the redemption time. Moreover, he did not believe that such a small probability event would happen to him. Next was a mobile phone. The contact list was empty, and the only valuable information was the bank card's income and expenditure reminders. It could be seen that at the end of every month, Zero's family would send him 1,500 yuan for living expenses. Now there were only 12 yuan left in the card, and there were still 4 days before the next remittance date. It was not that he would starve to death, but he had no money left to do other things. Finally, there were a few pieces of jewelry. The materials seemed to be gold, but he did not know whether they were real or not. Perhaps they were prepared for his wedding. If he sold them to a gold shop, he could probably get about 1,000 yuan, which could be regarded as an emergency fund. These were all the wealth he could freely dispose of. It was not helpful for his current situation. Roland sighed and looked at the furnishings in the utility room. He opened the door at the furthest end of the house and looked at the few old items placed inside. The dusty and cobwebbed bicycle and sewing machine could be sold for 30 to 40 yuan. After all, they were made of iron, especially the latter, which was very difficult for a person to carry. And the big iron door, if it was regarded as scrap iron, could probably be sold for more than 100 yuan. Maybe he would not care about such a small amount of money in normal times, but now it was very precious. If he went to an old bookstore to buy obsolete teaching materials, more than 100 yuan was enough to buy a set of old books on all subjects. Thinking of this, he decided to do so. Roland remembered that there was a number for recycling in the small advertisement posted on the stairwell. But before that, he had to clean these things. If they looked clean, he might be able to sell them for more money. Panting, he dragged the bicycle and sewing machine into the living room. Then, he noticed that something was wrong. The thick iron door did not seem to be leaning against the wall of the utility room, but was built into the wall. What the hell? Which bastard did this? The wall was the outer wall of the tube-shaped apartment. Did they put the door here to facilitate suicide? Moreover, there was a lock on the door. Wait. He remembered that there were 2 keys on the key ring. Roland immediately took the key and inserted the other key into the keyhole. It fit perfectly. With a click, the rusty lock bounced up and fell off the latch. He was too lazy to pick up the broken lock. He pulled the pin and forced the iron door open. A cold wind mixed with snowflakes rushed into the room, making him, who was wearing a short-sleeved shirt and shorts, shiver a few times. Behind the iron door was a snowy scene. Against the background of the rolling snowy mountains in the distance, a gray-brown city was faintly visible. It was built along the mountain walls on both sides, surrounding itself in a big gap. In the center of the city stood a towering building, like a pillar to the sky, in the howling cold wind. Even though it was Roland's first time seeing it, he immediately knew where this place was. Hermes' new holy city. A fortress city built on the broken part of the impassable mountain range. Chapter 644. Roland slammed the door shut and took 2 deep breaths. The snowflakes on his body quickly melted into water droplets. Although he had long understood the impermanence of dreams, this scene still shocked him. Roland walked to the window of the storeroom and looked out. The outer wall was smooth and tidy, with no trace of a door or repair. In other words, when this apartment building was built, the door was also embedded in the wall, and not installed later. So, is this only room 0825 has such an iron door, or does every apartment have the same iron door? If other rooms also have doors that lead to different spaces, what will they show? This idea made Roland even more excited. He returned to the bedroom and rummaged through the closet for a set of winter clothes to put on. The shriveled-down jacket was obviously shedding badly, and the knitted scarf was split. However, he didn't have a better choice at the moment. After putting on these winter clothes in midsummer, Roland suddenly felt as if he was surrounded by a stove. His sweat kept gushing out, and his body temperature rose sharply. When he came to the iron door again, he kicked off his flip-flops, put on a pair of green leather shoes, and directly pushed the door open. The biting cold wind immediately poured into his body through the gaps of his collar and cuffs. Together with the sweat that flowed out from before, he felt extremely sour. Under the combination of cold and heat, he could not help but sneeze several times. Wait, if I keep this door open, won't I have an air conditioner in my house that doesn't consume electricity? He wondered what Zero would think if she saw this scene. Roland rubbed his nose and looked back. The opening of the door seemed to be connected to a basement half buried in the soil slope. There were many similar low storehouses around, which were obviously built by farmers or merchants living outside the city, usually to store grain, ale, or other sundries. However, there was no one stationed around, and this camp seemed to be abandoned. And the scene that amazed him was hundreds of meters behind the soil slope. The world in front of him had a clear boundary. At the end of his field of vision, the slope covered with snow had been cut off in the middle. Broken rocks were floating in the air as if there was no gravity. Further away was a chaotic whirlwind and endless darkness. Occasionally, a crimson bolt of lightning would flash across and illuminate the border area. Even so, the darkness was bottomless. Although this scene was terrifying, it was incomparably magnificent. If one had to describe it, it was like a lone island floating in the void. The border extended along the mountains until it disappeared in the wind and snow. There was no doubt that such a border also existed on the other side of the holy city, but it was too far away for him to see it for the time being. Is this Zero's remaining memory fragment? Roland did not dare to go to the border to see what was going on. Whether it was the wind that tore the rocks apart or the lightning that cut through the sky, they all revealed a dangerous aura. He did not go to the holy city immediately. From here, it would take at least half an hour to reach the city. If he walked in the snow that was up to his ankles, it would only be slower. He should be more prepared. After that, Roland walked around the outskirts of the camp. Whether it was the basement, the houses, or the tents, there was no vitality in the whole camp area. All the residents seemed to have disappeared. This place was somewhat like a battlefield of souls, just with the memory as the background stage. According to this deduction, the holy city should also be empty. Although there was no trace of life activity, everything in the warehouse was still there, and it seemed to be frozen at the moment when the memory was stripped away. For example, the grapes in Roland's hand. He found them in a small basement next door. The iron lock on the door could not stop him at all, so he went back to the house to find a wrench and directly twisted the door bolt. There were a lot of food stored in it, such as pickled jerky, fish slices, wheat, and half a box of grapes. They looked very fresh, probably from the old holy city below the plateau. When he picked one and put it in his mouth, he could still feel its cold sweetness. The biggest harvest came from a small iron box in a secret compartment in the basement. It was not that he was careful enough, but the secret compartment hidden in the wall was in a state of open, and there was even a burning oil lamp on the side, as if someone had just disappeared without a trace when storing something, leaving only the lattice that was not closed and half of the iron box exposed. There were more than 10 golden dragon and a few clear gems in the box, which were obviously of high quality. Roland did not hesitate to put them into his pocket. After confirming that the things in the memory could be brought into the apartment, he immediately got busy. After tossing and turning in the snow for nearly 2 hours, Roland moved the valuable things into the house bit by bit, including a lot of food and a small amount of military equipment, such as iron armor, daggers, and light crossbows. The former could save food expenses, and the latter could probably be sold online. Only when the storeroom was filled to the brim did he reluctantly lock the iron door. This feeling of picking up junk was simply amazing. When he thought of the whole holy city for him to plunder, he could not help but want to laugh out loud. Not to mention living expenses, it would not be a problem to become rich overnight. Roland took off his clothes, panting. When he was about to drink some water, a strong sense of dizziness suddenly came over him. What happened? He staggered 2 steps, but before he reached the coffee table, he felt his vision turned upside down, and then there was a bang, and darkness enveloped him. When he woke up again, Roland found himself lying on the bed in his bedroom, sore all over, as if he had experienced a marathon. The city outside the blinds was covered by the night sky, and it was obvious that he had slept for more than 1 or 2 hours. Probably because he was too tired and had a heatstroke caused by the alternating cold and heat, he thought to himself that he should have taken a nap before going. But to his surprise, he did not feel weak at the moment. Instead, apart from the soreness, he was full of energy, as if there was a hot current constantly circulating in his body. Everywhere it went, his sense of touch became extremely sensitive. At this moment, Roland felt a small breath coming from beside his pillow. He slightly tilted his head and saw Zero lying beside him. She was holding a wet towel in her hand, and half of her face was illuminated by the moonlight. Her thin eyelashes trembled slightly, and her back rose and fell slowly along with her breath. Probably because the room was too stuffy, her dress was soaked in sweat, and her arms were also covered with fine beads of sweat. At the same time, there was a unique sour smell of sweat. Obviously, the little girl had dragged him from the living room to the bedroom, and at the same time, she had done the most basic cooling treatment. He smacked his lips, and there was still a lingering taste of Huxiangzhengqi water in his mouth. How did she get the medicine in? Looking at Zero's defenseless sleeping posture, Roland shook his head helplessly. He quietly sat up, carried her to the bed, and quietly returned to the living room. Since she cared so much about the cleanliness of the room, she would definitely not be willing to sleep without a bath. He might as well throw her on his bed and wipe the mat tomorrow. Anyway, it was dirty enough on the bed. Lying on the sofa, he found that the soreness was fading little by little, and the hot current in his body was becoming more and more obvious. Roland realized that it was not an illusion. It was something indescribable. He touched his trouser pocket, took out a golden dragon from the memory fragment, and held it in his palm. The hot current condensed in his palm according to his will. Chapter 645. The next morning, when the first ray of sunlight shone into the living room, he opened his eyes. The table fan had been blowing hot air all night, and the cicadas were chirping outside the window. Well, now I can confirm that sleeping in the dream world will not bring me back to reality, Roland thought, and it can also help me rest. Although it sounds a little strange, but whatever, as long as it works. He yawned and got up from the sofa. When he was about to go to the kitchen to make breakfast, Zero's scream suddenly came from the bedroom. Then she appeared at the door with a flushed face, pointed at Roland, and stammered, "Yesterday I slept on the sofa last night." Roland shrugged. "Come on, you were sweaty and didn't take a shower." "I won't sleep with you." The little girl picked up her collar and smelled it. Her face became even redder, and compared with her snow-white hair, it was no different from a ripe apple. She hurriedly ran back to her bedroom and fiddled with it for a while, and then rushed into the bathroom with a change of clothes. Soon, the sound of a shower came from inside. When she came out, Roland had already made breakfast. Compared with the usual monotonous fried eggs and fried fritters, this time the breakfast was much more sumptuous: fried bacon, salt and pepper egg, grilled dried fish, and a plate of fresh grapes. Of course, all the raw materials came from the holy city behind the iron gate. "You bought meat?" Zero asked in surprise with a wet headscarf wrapped around her. Roland could see her Adam's apple moving slightly, and it was obvious that she was swallowing. "Yes, I bought a lot and put them in the fridge." Roland handed her a pair of chopsticks. "I found a new job." "Really?" Her voice suddenly became excited, as if she had forgotten what had just happened. "Yes, I'll get my salary soon," Roland said with a smile. "I bought these to celebrate." The little girl breathed a sigh of relief. "I thought you finally broke the bottom line and did something irrevocable." "What do you mean irrevocable?" He secretly cursed. Could it be that this fellow thought that he would steal or rob? It seems that robbery in the dream world is not a big deal. So you also got a heatstroke yesterday because you were out in the sun while looking for a job? Probably. He threw a grape into his mouth. "Anyway, we don't have to worry about money anymore." "So fragile." Zero curled her lips. "When will you stop making people worry so much, Uncle?" Roland almost choked on his grapes. "You make it sound like you're always worried about me." This time it was Zero's turn to be speechless. After a while, she glared at him and said, "The breakfast you made is really a waste of ingredients. You obviously didn't salt the bacon, but you added one more." This guy really knows how to change the topic. Roland picked up a piece of bacon and put it into his mouth. "I think it's not bad. It's just that there are some parts that aren't fried." "Let me do it in the future, really," Zero said as she quickly swept the food on the plate. She then picked up her school bag and walked out of the door. "Leave the plates here. I'll wash them with dinner when I come back." "Wait," Roland stopped her. "Do you know where there's a second-hand bookstore nearby?" This time, it took him 3 days to get out of the dream world. When he woke up, the sun in Neverwinter had already risen in the middle of the sky. It seemed that the flow of time in the dream world was about 1/8. In other words, one night in the real world was equivalent to 2 days in the dream world. If he included the time he spent in bed, he would not be noticed even if he stayed in bed for 3 days. The first thing Roland did when he got up was to find a golden dragon. He then put it in his hand and squeezed it hard. The golden dragon did not move at all, but his fingers were hurting from the squeezing. It seemed that the inexplicable power would only appear in the dream world. He sighed and put the golden dragon back in its original position. He put on his coat and sat in front of the desk. Roland planned to copy down the key knowledge he had reviewed while his memory was still clear, including the missing parts of various basic subjects and the detailed design drawings of some large-scale industrial equipment. In the past 3 days, he had not been idle at all. Selling the stolen goods went smoothly. He first found a local second-hand goods forum and posted the pictures of the armors on the internet, claiming that he had a batch of imitation medieval handicrafts for sale at a low price. Because of the excellent workmanship and the extremely low price, buyers soon came to him. In the end, all the armors were sold at the price of 500 coins per set, and the crossbow and dagger were sold at a cabbage price of 100 coins per set. Anyway, it was a business with no capital, so Roland did not feel sad at all. However, the golden dragon was much more difficult to sell than he had imagined. Even if he squeezed all of them into a round pancake, the bank would not accept gold goods sold illegally, regardless of whether they were gold bars or gold jewelry. The gold shop was also rejected. Several gold shops nearby only took back the jewelry sold in the shop and had to pay a handling fee. However, a salesman gave him an address, saying that there was an old pawn shop there that could take back gold goods of unknown origin, but the price was only half of the market price. Thinking that there were only about 10 golden dragon pieces in total, and the quality was far from pure gold, Roland simply threw them all into the closet. If he had the time, he might as well move a few more sets of armors. As for the 3 dazzling gems, Roland did not know who to sell them to, so he had to leave it unsettled in the end. With the remaining money, he immediately swept through the second-hand bookstore near the apartment building and bought all the textbooks he had read. As for those he had not read, they only had a cover, and the pages were all blank. Obviously, the dream world was not beyond the scope of his consciousness, so it was impossible for Anna to dominate all fields for the time being. Fortunately, he had a wide range of hobbies. He had browsed a lot of miscellaneous useless knowledge on the internet, and he could find detailed answers even if he had only seen some drawings on the internet. In addition to these necessities that could quickly improve the technological level of Neverwinter, Roland also bought 2 new clothes for Zero and a set of winter camping equipment for himself, spending all the money he had earned. He could still remember the shock and disbelief on the little girl's face when she received the new clothes. She had refused several times before accepting them, completely lacking the carefree attitude that a child of her age should have. When he asked her curiously, he found out that it was the first time she had received a gift. It was already good enough that they did not beat her at home. As the creator of the dream world, Roland inexplicably felt a little guilty. He was busy until noon when Nightingale quietly appeared in the room. "You didn't go down for breakfast?" "Yes," Roland replied without raising his head. "Please bring me a lunch. I'll eat in my bedroom." "This is the result of your morning." Nightingale weighed the stack of papers on the table in surprise. "How did you suddenly come up with so many ideas?" "They originally existed in my mind, but I just forgot about them for a while." Roland exercised his wrist. "Have a look. What do you think?" "A mathematical model that describes the electromagnetic field in a certain volume, in the form of integral?" Nightingale put her hand on her forehead. "Your Majesty, I'm a little dizzy. I'll bring you lunch first." Roland could not help but smile. "Go ahead. By the way, aren't you going to the office today?" She turned around and asked when she reached the door. "What's wrong?" Chapter 646. After lunch, Roland called Berev into his bedroom. It was the first time for Berev to come to such a place. He was obviously more cautious than usual, but his face was full of excitement. Seeing Berev's reaction, Roland could not help but think of the story of a famous person in history who ran out to receive a visiting minister in disheveled clothes, and the latter was greatly moved. Roland was just slacking off, but the old director felt a strong sense of trust from him. It was an unintentional move. He had to admit that male officials had unique advantages in promoting loyalty, such as talking by candlelight and sleeping together. If it was Edith Kant, she would probably have a different idea. He shook his head with a smile and put these distracting thoughts aside. How many letters did you receive during the time I was fighting in the northern region and when I was in a coma? A total of 16 letters, Berev quickly reported. Most of them were letters from various lords requesting for trade or visiting. There were also 2 secret letters from the guardian of the eastern region expressing his desire to negotiate peace with you. I replied to them one by one according to your previous request. According to the task assigned by the pre-war conference, Berev temporarily took charge of the administrative affairs of Neverwinter when the king led the army. He was also responsible for opening and reading the letters sent to the king. If the message was particularly important and beyond the preset reply range, he would send it to the front line by flying courier. Is it just a negotiation? Yes, they are not willing to hand over the feudal power and advised you to preserve the tradition and glory of the nobles. When spring comes next year, they will naturally know what choice they should make. Roland shrugged. What about the letters that I need to read in person? Where did they come from? One is from the Astrologer Association of the City of Dawn, and the other is from the Kingdom of Dawn. Berev handed over 2 pieces of paper. When they arrived, you were in a state of deep sleep. The contents are also a little strange. Strange? Roland first spread out the parchment with the pattern of the constellation. The letter was written by Astrologer of Dispersion Star. The first half of the letter was about greetings and gratitude. The astronomical telescope given to the observatory had been put to use, so it was natural for them to express their gratitude. However, the following content made him stunned. Traces of the star of extinction have been found in the starry sky. A star flashing with red light in a fixed position. Roland immediately thought of the geosynchronous orbit. Based on his poor knowledge of astronomy, only objects in a synchronous orbit could remain relatively still with the planet. However, if the crimson moon appeared in this orbit, it was impossible for it not to affect the planet itself, and the observation results also showed that its size should be extremely small. So the crimson moon is not a natural celestial body, but a man-made satellite? Roland thought for a moment and rejected this conjecture. If it was a satellite, how could it descend to the world? According to Agatha, the moment the bloody moon appeared, everyone on the mainland could see its existence. It was bigger and brighter than the moon. The scarlet light dyed the stone walls of the holy city red. Even in the daytime, its outline could be seen. This was completely illogical. He was silent for a long time before he put the letter aside. Draft a letter for me and invite the astrologers to Neverwinter. But they refused you last time, Berev said hesitantly. I'm afraid this time, the situation is different. The Astrology Association has found the star they want to pursue. Now they only need to keep an eye on that piece of sky. Roland tapped the table and said, in the letter, tell them that Neverwinter has developed a better astronomical telescope and found some ancient books about the star of extinction. I believe they will come. Yes. He spread out the second letter, or rather, a note. Like the usual secret letters, the message sent by the flying courier was always very concise. The King of Dawn passed away and his eldest son, Apan Moya, succeeded the throne. He ordered to wipe out the believers of the church, cut off the trade route with the holy city, and search for witches. As a result, there was a rebellion in the border area, and our caravans were also affected. The original plan may need to be suspended temporarily. Roland could not help but frown. Berev did not know what the church had done in the Kingdom of Dawn, so it was normal that he did not have a clue. After Isabella and the others left, the King of Dawn, who had no medicine, would die of a coma sooner or later. He just did not expect that Appin would hate the church so much that he even hated the witches. Among these policies, wiping out the believers was still acceptable, but unilaterally banning trade would basically cut off the income of the border lords. The rebellion must have the shadow of the church behind it, and searching for witches was completely against his own interests. Such an impulsive order was unlikely to be the idea of the three big families. It could only be said that the new king had been blinded by hatred and wanted to avenge his father. He had originally thought that the Kingdom of Dawn would be a potential ally, but it turned out to be a big disappointment. Send a formal diplomatic letter, Roland said slowly. First, congratulate him on being crowned king, and then warn him not to do so. The pure ones are not the same as witches. Greycastle has formed a formal witch organization, and to regard them as enemies is to make an enemy of Greycastle. Ah. Your Majesty, Barav wiped the sweat from his forehead. Are you sure you want to write this? Is there a problem? The other side will not take it seriously at all, and may even regard your words as a threat. Roland naturally knew that sometimes even the vassals of local lords would not accept the king's orders, let alone meddling in foreign politics. But times had changed, and if the other side did not understand, he did not mind teaching them what real diplomacy was. This itself is a threat, Roland replied bluntly. If Appin Moya insists on having his own way, when we attack the holy city next year, let's change the king of the Kingdom of Dawn, a wise person who is willing to stand on the side of Greycastle and fight together against the battle of divine will, such as Andrea of the Quinn family. Diplomacy in the new era would be based on steel guns and cannons, and what could not be achieved at the negotiation table would be achieved by the army. Not to mention interfering in the internal affairs of other countries, replacing the heir, supporting the opposition, and directly dispatching troops to occupy other countries were all common methods. Before the arrival of the Bloody Moon, Roland did not want any other kingdom to hinder him. Therefore, the core content of the entire diplomatic letter was, "Don't say I didn't warn you." Chapter 647. After all, Roland could not stay in his bedroom for the whole day. Near dusk, he received a notice from Nightingale that Tilly wanted to see him. Roland had to put on his coat, tie up his long hair, and go to the office with a stack of papers. When he pushed the door open, he found that Tilly and Ashes were already waiting for him in the room. Seeing that he was holding something heavy in his hands, Ashes took the initiative to greet him and took the thick papers for him. Roland was a little surprised by this move. He did not expect that the extraordinary, who had always disliked him, would take the initiative to help him one day. The setting sun shone through the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the wall orange-red. At the same time, it left a golden edge on the two of them, giving them a sense of parting. Roland had roughly guessed the purpose of Tilly's visit. Although he was a little reluctant, he knew that this day would come eventually. She did not choose to leave without saying goodbye when he was in a coma, which was enough to show her sincerity. "I'm here to say goodbye to you." As expected, Tilly said calmly, "I have to go back to Sleeping Island to deal with the problem of the Blood Fang Association." Looking at Tilly's beautiful face and her eyes that reflected the afterglow of the setting sun, Roland was silent for a while and then said, "I see. When will the charming beauty arrive in the western region? I'll ask the kitchen to prepare a farewell banquet for you." "Wait." He suddenly froze. "A trip? You'll come back?" Ashes could not help but cover her mouth. Tilly chuckled. "Why? Don't you welcome me, brother?" "No, I mean, why do you?" Roland opened his mouth in surprise, but he did not know what to say. After a while, he said, "Because of the months of demons?" "I won't deny it if you think so." Tilly spread out her hands and said, "But don't you have higher expectations?" He was completely stunned. "Are you?" "Yes," Tilly said straightforwardly. "I'll bring the news of your victory back to Sleeping Island and tell them that Neverwinter in the western region of Greycastle has completely gotten rid of the threat of the church. They don't have to live in fear and hide on this island anymore. When you're ready, I'll bring witches who are willing to go to the western region to settle down here." I hope you don't mind that they eat too much. An indescribable excitement surged in Roland's heart. They're always welcome in the western region. Your building can't accommodate so many witches, Princess Tilly revealed a sly smile. Even if only half of them are willing to come, it's still several times more than the Witch Union. Moreover, most of them are not combat witches. I intend to hire a ship to transport them after the months of demons is over. At that time, the route will be much safer. I'll build enough houses before next spring. This won't be a problem for Car. In addition, I have 3 additional conditions. Tilly held up 3 fingers and said, I hope you can promise me, brother. Seeing her serious look, Roland could not help sitting up straight. Go ahead. First of all, if they want to leave Neverwinter and go to other towns, you can't restrict their freedom. No problem, he replied without hesitation. But now that Grey Castle has not been unified, I can't guarantee that the people in other places will treat witches equally. For safety reasons, I suggest that they only settle in the western region and Sleeping Island for the time being. It won't be too late to leave the western region when I can control the whole kingdom. It's just a hypothesis. Tilly nodded with satisfaction. Secondly, if they don't want to work for you, you can't force them. Roland poured a cup of tea for them. Can I tempt them to work for me? As long as you don't force them. Tilly gave him an affirmative look. That's right. He could not help laughing. It was not difficult for him to attract this group of inexperienced young girls, who were busy seeking refuge everywhere after their basic awakenings, into the tide of industrialization. He had a lot of reward mechanisms that could make them fall for it. Not to mention the salary, just the soap, wine, and ice cream were enough to attract them. Not to mention the salary, just the provision of soap, wine, and ice cream, which could only be exchanged for by working witches, was enough to attract them. The sugar-coated bullets of capital were far more effective than simple violence. Finally, I hope that the sleeping spell can exist independently. When saying this, Tilly looked a little hesitant. She probably thought that this request might be a little harsh. Of course, part of the money earned by the sleeping spell will be handed over to Neverwinter. The sleeping spell? Roland was stunned. He remembered that this organization was a guild of bounties to solve the conflict between combat witches and assistant witches and to earn benefits for Sleeping Island. In other words, almost all the witches on the island belonged to the sleeping spell. If it existed independently, it meant that all of them were under the jurisdiction of Tilly. He soon understood why Princess Tilly was hesitant when she said this. The sleeping spell would move here but manage it as an independent organization. Whether it was accepting bounty tasks or dispatching people to the fjords, it was still decided by the sleeping spell. It seemed that she was deliberately guarding against him. But Roland immediately agreed. Of course, as long as they follow the laws of the territory. Isn't this equivalent to a private company? In fact, when he realized that the witches of Sleeping Island might move to the western region, he was not only happy but also a little worried. He did not know whether he should let them join the Witch Union. As one of the 3 major administrative organizations alongside City Hall and the First Army, the Witch Union would obviously be safe in the hands of Vendi, who was loyal to him. However, there were too many witches on Sleeping Island. Once all of them joined the Witch Union, it would inevitably weaken Vendi's control. At that time, he would not be able to intervene in the management of the Witch Union. If he did not accept them into the Union, it would seem that he was too cold to these witches who came from afar. Now that Tilly took the initiative to propose it, Roland felt a little relieved. Besides, it was normal for Tilly to still be a little worried. Trust itself needed time to build. Compared to before, this was already a huge improvement. Really? Seeing him agree so readily, Tilly could not help but feel a little surprised. Don't worry. I'll never go back on my word. Roland smiled. Is that so? Tilly also relaxed. Then I'll go back to my room to pack up. The charming beauty will arrive in about 3 days. In addition to the accompanying combat witches, I'll also take Iffy and Soft Feathers with me. But I'll send them here after the Blood Fang Association's business is over. Will you also come here after the months of demons? You asked me if it was because of the months of demons. I said. She blinked. I didn't deny it. That is to say, you'll come here earlier? Roland asked. Chapter 648. When they left, Ashes, who was following Princess Tilly, suddenly stopped, turned around and said, I owe you an apology, Your Majesty. This was the first time that Roland had heard her use honorifics to address him. It doesn't matter. The things that happened in the palace, I'm also a little. We all know that it wasn't you. Ashes shook her head. Such a person would never have been able to lead us to victory against the church, nor would he have been able to give the witches full freedom and trust. I'm sorry, it wasn't until you defeated the church that I believed this. She paused. Every witch will remember everything you've done, and you're more suitable to be Lady Tilly's brother than him. For Ashes to say such a thing, it could only mean that Tilly herself also thought so. But in the end, they still didn't believe that he was Prince Roland. Roland did not know whether to laugh or cry. But was this an alternative way of recognition? Looking at his sister who was smiling behind her, he suddenly understood something. The extraordinary put her right hand on her chest and slightly bent over. Her black ponytail hung over her shoulder, and her golden eyes were like the dazzling stars in the dusk. Messenger Ashes pays her respects to you, Your Majesty. 3 days later, the farewell banquet that Andrea had been waiting for finally arrived. She was not looking forward to leaving, but looking forward to the new delicacies that His Majesty had announced. Since the last time they parted, she had been thinking about the food that His Majesty said was more delicious than ice cream, so she had great expectations for it this time. However, the war with the church was of great importance, so she was too embarrassed to mention it. Now she could finally get what she wanted. The banquet was not held in the castle, but in the expanded back garden. She walked through the olive trees and into the center of the garden. Before she even saw any food, an extremely rich aroma had already entered her nostrils. Crystal fish from the Everwinter Glacier. 100-flavored eggs from the cliffs of the Kingdom of Wolfheart. Or rainbow trout from the fjords. No. It was all wrong. She had never smelled such an attractive aroma. Even the rarest ingredients could not be so fragrant. I suddenly feel so hungry, Shavi shouted. Have you always lived like this in the western region? Molly licked her lips. How enviable. I haven't enjoyed it much, Breeze hugged Lotus and Evelyn. They're the ones you should be envious of. This kind of banquet is not held every day, explained the candle, and usually the dessert is made only once every 3 days. It's only been 3 days. Molly held her forehead. Why do I feel like you're showing off? I didn't. Hey, don't drool. Ashes glanced at Andrea, even though her Adam's apple was also moving. Andrea did not respond with her usual sarcasm. Her attention was now completely focused on a few round tree stumps placed at the side of the garden. At first glance, they looked as if they had grown out of the ground. Their thick trunks required 7 or 8 people to encircle. Hot air billowed in the middle as if something was burning. When she walked closer, she found that the inside of the tree stumps had been hollowed out, and a huge iron pot was set up on top. The strong aroma came from the soup in the pot. The short table next to the tree stumps was piled with all kinds of food. Although there were many kinds of food, they were all common things to eat, and there were no rare dishes. Another thing that she couldn't figure out was that the food was raw. This was the first time Andrea had seen this kind of banquet. There were no attendants shuttling between the tables, no white cloth, no music, and no crowd. Everyone sat around the tree stumps. Looking at this posture, it seemed that they had to do it themselves. Sure enough, when all the witches had arrived, Roland clapped his hands and announced the start of the banquet. This is a hot pot banquet. The way to eat it is very simple. Put the food you like into the pot, cook it, and then enjoy it. Autumn was a good season for eating hot pot. As a cooking method that was widely loved by the people, it was easy to operate and could be understood at a glance. Even the simplest vegetable dishes could taste delicious. Most importantly, it was very down to earth. The diners gathered together and shared the delicacies from the same pot. Compared to traditional banquets that were particular about style, it was easier to enhance mutual affection. As a banquet before parting, it could also wash away the reluctance and depression in people's hearts. The essence of hot pot was the soup. In this era, cooking methods were very monotonous. Usually, each ingredient had its own taste, so they paid special attention to the quality of the ingredients themselves. Roland ordered the chef to mix all kinds of food with unique tastes, such as whole chickens, pork bones, bird beak mushrooms, seafood, spices, and so on, and boil them in the pot. The rich taste of the soup was far from what could be achieved by cooking one or two ingredients separately. As for the natural style of the hot pot table, it was made by Leaf. The heart of the forest could make plants grow according to her wishes. Without any additional processing, it could take the shape that Roland wanted. The inside of the table was covered with an insulating coating. Even if an alcohol lamp was lit, the table would not burn. On the contrary, the temperature of the inner wall would slowly spread to the whole tree stump. You could feel the warmth when you put your hands on the table. When Andrea put a piece of cooked meat into her mouth, she couldn't help but moan at the rich and strong taste. The aroma of dozens of ingredients attacked her tongue one after another. Coupled with the hot soup flowing down her throat and into her stomach, this feeling was completely different from ice cream bread, but it made her unable to stop eating. According to the dining etiquette of the nobles, they should finish the food on their plates first before taking new food. However, they obviously could not eat the new thing that His Majesty had made. Otherwise, they could only watch as others scooped up all the food. Her sisters at the same table were not very elegant either. Or it could be said that the way to eat hot pot was fated to be elegant. Even Lady Tilly had a few plates of delicacies neatly placed in front of her, and Ashes even scooped up a spoon in front of her several times. The true essence of food is the original taste. Only when nothing is added can the soup be more similar to the original taste. Who said that? The extraordinary imitated her tone and said, I remember that someone regarded salt and spices as a barbaric way of cooking and said that real nobles would never use it. Why is it so different from what I see? If it were in the past, Andrea might have argued a little and even felt a little upset. But now, she understood what was most important. It was much more meaningful to seize the time to enjoy the food than to waste words. She glanced at Ashes indifferently, and without hesitation, she pushed away the other's spoon and put the rolling meat into her own bowl. Chapter 649. After saying goodbye to Tilly, Roland spent all his time copying materials. First, he wrote the basic courses of various subjects. The textbooks he had written from memory were not complete. Now that he had the opportunity to sort out the content hidden deep in his consciousness, he naturally had to fill in the missing parts. Second, he wrote the blueprints of the current equipment in Neverwinter. There was still a big gap between usable and usable. Using these mature designs, he could further improve the efficiency of the steam engine and machine tools. Under the guidance of the new blueprints, Anna finally completed the manufacturing of the first steam turbine prototype. Unlike the way he accompanied girls in his previous life, Roland rushed to the backyard of the North Slope after receiving the news. The two sat side by side on the workbench in the yard, admiring the huge machine together. It was nearly 6 meters long, and the densely packed impellers were tightly attached to the outer shell, making it look like a huge metal drum. It was connected to a preheating boiler and a steam boiler. Under the heating of coal, the main shaft was driven by high-pressure steam to rotate. Whether it was efficiency, noise, or vibration, it was much better than the reciprocating steam engine. As a new generation of motive power, the prototype would be used on ships to meet the needs of Thunder's exploration. Unfortunately, although it had a wide range of uses, it was difficult for the factory to produce the steam turbine in a short period of time. In addition, Anna would soon devote herself to the work of improving the machine tools, so there would not be a second steam turbine for the time being. What do you think? She leaned over and touched Roland's chin. I'm awesome, right? Unlike most girls, Anna was happiest when she turned the blueprints into real objects. Every time she completed a major project, her joy and satisfaction were always written on her face. It was obvious that Anna liked her current life very much. Of course, second only to me. Roland smiled and wiped the stain on her cheek, leaving a shallow gray mark. Every time he saw her clear and transparent lake blue eyes, he swallowed the words he promised Nightingale. Although he had made up his mind to confess to her, he only realized how difficult it was to actually do it. No matter what excuse he gave himself, it could not lighten the burden. In the past few days, he had been constantly copying books and sketching. He wanted to use work to fill his free time and avoid worrying about gains and losses. However, procrastination was also a form of harm, especially to Nightingale, who was filled with anticipation. He could not keep running away. When the boiler gradually cooled down and the steam turbines stopped operating, Roland took a deep breath and whispered in Anna's ear, "Come to my bedroom tonight. I have something to tell you." At night, he sat in front of his desk and could hear his heart pounding. This era is not like modern society. No one cares how many women the nobles have. I'm just following my heart. No one would think it was against common sense. Roland kept coming up with reasons in his mind, but he rejected them one by one. It was as if there were two consciousnesses fighting over his head. He wanted to fill in the last bit of content that he hadn't finished copying, but in the end, he held the pen in his hand and couldn't write a word for a long time. Until the door was pushed open by Anna. The argument above his head instantly disappeared without a trace. He put down the quill and focused his attention on the girl. She looked the same as usual. She was wearing loose pajamas, and her wet bangs stuck to her forehead. There was a hint of a smile hidden in her happy expression. For some reason, Roland suddenly recalled the scene when she took the initiative to wait for him at the staircase after the first months of demons. Anna would never complain or feel wronged. She would only express her thoughts and requests straightforwardly. Now it was his turn. Roland pulled her to the table and slowly told her what was in his mind. There was a long silence, so long that he thought Anna would turn around and leave. He slowly raised his head to look at her, but the expression in her eyes didn't change much. That's it? Roland was stunned. What? I've been wondering when you would tell me about it. Anna sat down beside him. I didn't want you to say it so early, but I wanted you to say it as soon as possible. Now I finally don't have to worry about it. He opened his mouth wide. Did you already know? I could see it, especially Nightingale's feelings for you, she said bluntly. The later you confessed, the more it showed that you cared about my feelings. But I also hoped that you would tell me your thoughts earlier, because no matter what it was, I was willing to share it with you. At this point, Anna sighed softly. At first, I didn't expect to win the love of a royal family. Later, it gradually became that I only wanted to be by your side. Since you said you wanted to marry me, my thoughts changed again. Roland, I won't give you to anyone. Sorry, You don't need to apologize. Feelings are unreasonable, and I'm very happy that you chose to tell me this at this time. She paused. You're not from this world, right? Roland's heart skipped a beat. It doesn't matter if he's a noble or not, there shouldn't be anyone who would hesitate or feel uneasy about this kind of thing, unless the world he lives in is very different from ours, Anna continued. Similarly, in this world, there may be people who will treat witches well, but they won't treat them as close friends. Do you remember the bet you made with me? In the book, I wrote that you were a visitor from another world, not hell or abyss, but a more beautiful place. You came with knowledge that we have never seen before. It was God who sent you to me. At this time, he had nothing to hide. Although the details are different, but you guessed right. I also wrote that you would confess to me about Nightingale. Anna chuckled softly. Now it seems that at least I've guessed two things correctly. Roland found that Anna's intelligence was not only in learning, but also in understanding and observation. Before he could speak, the girl held his hand and said word by word, "I can't promise you about Nightingale, at least not now." Roland could not help but be stunned. At least not now. What does that mean? Can I promise you in the future? I know what you're worried about. Don't worry, I'll talk to her. Go to bed early. Anna kissed him gently on the forehead. Good night, Your Majesty. The door was closed with a squeak, and the room returned to silence. Roland did not come back to his senses until a long time after she had left. Chapter 650. The situation in King's City of the Kingdom of Dawn had been unstable recently. Even Yorko, who did not pay much attention to politics, could feel it. Since the new king had been crowned, guards had been breaking into the houses of the residents to search the streets every day. The rebellion of the Lord of the Border was the most frequently discussed topic in the tavern. There were fewer exotic goods in the exhibition, and even the caravan under his name had temporarily suspended the slave transportation. According to Hill, Appen Moya not only took in all the slaves in the kingdom of Wolfheart, but also granted them the status of free people. This was a good deed, but it hindered His Majesty's plan. Yorko did not have any objection to this. The caravan was provided to him by Denise, and the head fee of the slaves was also a business with no capital. He would not feel sad if he lost the slave fee. As long as he was still the ambassador of Greycastle, such benefits would always come to him. There was new progress in the alliance. On the third day after Appen's coronation, he was summoned to the palace to answer the new king's detailed inquiry about the covenant. When the news of the church's crushing defeat in Coldwind Ridge reached King's City, Appen happily put his fingerprint on the covenant. This was also the official completion of the first task given by His Majesty. But that night, Hill poured cold water on him. This covenant came too late, and I'm afraid it's no longer effective. He remembered the guard saying, and the new king's attitude towards witches is likely to arouse His Majesty's disgust. Timothy, the last one who did this, is a good example. You'd better keep this parchment as a souvenir. It was well known that Roland Wimbledon valued witches, but to break the covenant with a neighboring country because of witches? Yorko felt that Hill was just trying to scare him. Moreover, it was the King of Dawn's freedom to govern the kingdom. Even if His Majesty was discussed, what could he do? The Moya family had always been the ruler of the Kingdom of Dawn, and no one else could intervene. Of course, no matter what, he was still on his old friend's side. Witches were such beautiful and outstanding people, and they did not look like the devil's minions. Yorko shook his head and put these trifles behind him. He was just an ambassador, and it was enough for him to convey His Majesty's intention. As for the fluctuations of the situation and political changes, it had nothing to do with him. Since it was still early, he planned to meet Denise first, and then decide on the entertainment for tonight. Just as he was about to leave, the eldest son of the Luashi family suddenly came to him. Yorko had a bad feeling. Otto Luashi had never brought good news. His previous letters claimed that it was related to the survival of Greycastle, and then he said that the new king was completely different from his childhood. Every piece of information was a headache. If Hill had not insisted on maintaining this relationship, Yorko would have turned a blind eye to Otto Luashi. The first thing he did was to call Sheer over to oversee the situation and invited her into the living room. You have news from the palace to tell His Majesty again? Not at the moment. Otto poured himself a cup of tea. Do you have any plans tonight? Yes. In fact, he had not, but Yorko hoped that Denise would back off. Denise would take him to enjoy a romantic life, but Otto would only make him sleepless at night. Then reject it. I want you to do me a favor. He handed over a black letter. Yorko opened it and found an invitation letter inside. It was signed with a black dragon head, which was exactly the same as the pattern on the golden dragon. He shook his head after reading it. You want me to go to the exhibition with you? I don't have the money to bid for you. Denise had taken him to such exhibitions several times in the past, and the items they bought were indeed rarer and rarer. However, the prices were also extremely high, with each item being sold for thousands of gold royals. He had no idea how those rich merchants had managed to scrounge up so much money. You don't have to worry about money. Otto drank the tea in one gulp. Helping me this time is equivalent to helping your king. Tell me about it. Sheer, who was sitting beside him, said. I heard that one of the items being auctioned is a witch, he said in a low voice. Damn, I knew it was nothing good. Yorko thought to himself. Everyone knew that the new king was strictly arresting witches. Usually, he would gladly go, but at this moment, he really did not want to get involved. Aren't these people afraid of offending His Majesty Apan Moya? Moreover, the three families should be closely united around the king. Why do I feel that you are not willing to support his decree at all? However, Yorko hid this thought in his heart and did not say it out loud. Although the city of Glow is the territory of the Moya family, there are also places that they can't touch. Otto shrugged. Is this exhibition run by a rat? A rat wouldn't be a rat if it had the money to do this, Sheer said calmly. You're right. Otto nodded approvingly. This exhibition isn't that formal, but it's still organized by the most powerful local businessmen. They call it black money. They often sell things that are not very convenient to see the light of day, among which slaves are the majority. The slave market is open every day in the outer city, Yorko questioned. What's there to hide and sell? You'll understand when you see it. Maybe I can ask someone from the Peyton family to come with me. Yorko's curiosity had been aroused, but he did not want to be completely led by the nose by Sheer. Are you talking about the businesswoman who is always with you? She can't get in, Otto said. Black money has the strictest admission requirements of all the exhibitions. She's a little famous, but she's not qualified. Do you want to buy the witch? Sheer changed the topic. Not me, but Mr. Ambassador. Otto pointed at Yorko. The Luashi family is too close to the Moya royal family, so it's not convenient for me to act directly. It's easy to understand that the ambassador of Grey Castle wants to try something new. I'll pay for it. I hope you can send her to His Majesty's territory. With the protection of the ambassador's flag, she should be able to travel smoothly. But the slave trade has been suspended. Sheer spread out his hands. And I don't know when it will resume. You can transport some other goods. Just hide the witch in the caravan. Why do you want to do that? Because, an old friend. Otto hesitated. She's also a witch. I thought she fell off a cliff and died, but I didn't expect to see her in the western region of Grey Castle. His Majesty Roland Wimbledon told me that every witch is very precious and shouldn't be lost in the malicious rumors of the church. I also want to find a few more partners for her. About this, let me. While Yorko was still thinking of an excuse, Sheer had already grasped Otto's hand. Chapter 651. Thank you. I'll visit you again in the evening. Yorko stared at them in astonishment, wondering if they had made a mistake. He was the ambassador of Grey Castle. After Otto left, before he could question him, Hill interrupted him with one sentence. This is also what His Majesty hopes for. Yorko put his hand on his forehead and asked, Are you sure? I represent Grey Castle. If the King of Dawn knows about this, the relationship between the two countries will return to the previous situation. What should we do then? Let's not talk about whether Apan Moya has time to care about such a trivial matter. Even if he finds out, witches are more important than the Covenant, Hill said solemnly. Hill said solemnly. In fact, when we were selecting the slaves, my men had been secretly observing whether there were any witches among the refugees. What's the result? Nothing. He shook his head and said, either there are no witches among the refugees, or they're well hidden and have completely integrated into the local people. In short, if you can bring a witch back for His Majesty, he'll definitely reward you handsomely. You know how much His Majesty values them. Hearing that it was a request from his old friend, Yorko agreed with a bitter face. Forget it, I'll just take it as an eye-opener, he comforted himself. He was also curious about what kind of slaves were sold there since even Denise was not qualified to go there. In the evening, Otto showed up at the gate of the mansion on time. Yorko followed him into a luxurious carriage without any emblem. In addition to a thick fluffy carpet, there were 2 chains hanging down from the roof. It was obvious what they were used for at first glance. I didn't expect you to have such a hobby. Yorko whistled. Ahem, this isn't my carriage. Otto blushed slightly. Only this kind of carriage is suitable to cover people's eyes and ears while keeping them in place. You don't have to explain. I understand. He curiously touched the wristband under the chain and said, when this is over, can I borrow the carriage for a few days? Of course. It's just a rental fee of 50 silver royals a day, including the coachman. After Otto told the coachman his destination, he found a comfortable place and lay down. It's a bit far, so you can take a rest. How long will it take? About an hour ago, on the outskirts of the city of Glow. Does that mean we can't come back today? Yorko asked in surprise. The city gate will be closed after the sun sets, right? Black money provides shelter and food. In fact, all the services you can buy in the city of Glow are provided there. It sounds like a market. Pretty much. The only difference is that it's built underground. Otto explained, I've only been there once, so I don't know if the bidding process has changed. But as long as you follow the guide, there shouldn't be any problem. After you bid for the witch, you don't need to wait until the end of the exhibition. You can directly go backstage to get the witch, and then there will be attendants who will arrange a room for you. Wait. Yorko looked at him in surprise. Aren't you going in with me? There's only one invitation. What about the money? This black letter is money. Otto smiled. Holding it is equivalent to being recognized by the Chamber of Commerce. You only need to quote a price. Is there no upper limit? Yorko widened his eyes. Of course there is, but it's much higher than the price of a witch. According to the information I gathered, a witch was auctioned for about 1,000 gold coins a few years ago. Now that His Majesty Appin has ordered to eliminate witches, the final price should be lower. 1,000 golden dragon coins. Yorko was speechless. This group of upper-class nobles did not take money seriously. Even if they visited all the famous brothels in King's City, they would not spend so much money. Was it because his level was too low and he had never been exposed to those really expensive games? Besides, in order to gain her trust, you'd better not touch her. Otto coughed twice. After all, she's not a real slave. Otherwise, it may cause trouble on the way. Of course I understand that. Yorko sighed. That was the person His Majesty wanted. He would rather die than touch her. Anyway, remember to put a hood on her when you come out. We'll meet again tomorrow morning. The carriage drove out of the city gate and rushed all the way to the west. It did not slow down until the yellow afterglow was completely swallowed by the curtain of night. About the same as Otto's estimation, they arrived at their destination an hour later. The exhibition venue looked no different from an ordinary house at first glance. There was a spacious yard surrounded by crooked fences. A mud house made of mud and straw stood in the middle. Behind the yard was a bare farmland. The wheat had been harvested, leaving only bundles of wheat straws that looked like lumps growing out of the earth. The only eye-catching thing was that there were many swaying torches in the farmland. It was obvious that someone was guarding nearby. Moreover, there would not be a sentry post in front of the courtyard of an ordinary house. After checking the invitation, Otto and the accompanying guards all stayed outside the yard. Yorko followed the guide into the mud house and walked down the wooden ladder in the middle of the hall. After passing through a man-made narrow passage, he walked into a natural karst cave. The cave was almost half the size of the King's City Square. With the flickering light of the torches, he could see many dark holes on both sides of the cave, which led to an unknown place. The ground at the bottom of the cave had been polished and paved with flat tiles. Only the stalactites hanging overhead could show the original appearance of the place. Many people had gathered here and seemed to be waiting for the exhibition to begin. Yorko finally understood what Otto meant by, not so formal. Judging from the scene, it was really not much different from a gathering of mice. "Sir, this way please." The guide led him to the seat marked on the black letter and sat down beside him. "I'll be at your service throughout the exhibition. If you have any questions about the products, you can ask me." As she spoke, she pressed her soft chest against Yorko's arm. In the dim light, he could see her sharp chin and rosy lips under the mask. "Is this also a kind of service?" He stretched his elbow impolitely. "What's your name?" "Of course, sir. You can call me number 76. She spoke with a sweet voice, but her answer was not flustered at all. Well, he took back what he had said. Mice could never train such a servant. If every bidder had a guide, just the cost alone would be enough to make people gasp in astonishment. "But is it always so dark here?" Yorko asked with raised eyebrows, enjoying the soft touch on his arm. "It's impossible to see the products on the stage clearly. You'll know soon." She chuckled. As if to prove what number 76 said, the sound of metal rubbing suddenly came from the top of the cave. Then, several iron chains slid down, each with a strange stone hanging at the end. The light they emitted was several times brighter than that of the torches. In an instant, the stand in front of Yorko was clearly illuminated. The chatter in the cave suddenly quieted down. Against the soft and bright light, the torches seemed even dimmer. The whole cave seemed to be plunged into darkness. The stand became the only source of light and also the focus of everyone's attention. A man in formal attire stepped onto the stand and bowed to the crowd. Chapter 652. What's that? Yorko stared at the glowing object in amazement, completely ignoring the dazzling light. Is it also sold in the exhibition? It has many names, such as Sunstone, Light Crystal. But we prefer to call it Magic Stone, because we heard that it comes from the demon's lair, number 76 explained in a low voice. Black money has auctioned this kind of thing before, and the final price is between 2,000 and 3,000 golden dragon. It's not only expensive, but also very rare. It's not available in every exhibition. At least, there's no magic stone on the auction list tonight. She paused and asked, Sir, is this your first time here? Sort of. He touched his nose guiltily. If a single magic stone is worth so much, does it mean that the magic stone used to illuminate the stage is worth more than 10,000 golden dragon? That's too extravagant. The guide seemed to sense his uneasiness, so she took the initiative to approach him and whispered in his ear like a lover, It's nothing, sir. Every guest who attends the underground exhibition for the first time will be shocked by the magic stone. This is also a way for black money to show off their ability. You're also one of their means, aren't you? Yorko might not be as knowledgeable as those great noble families, but he was quite adept at treating women. Coupled with the guide's gentle and considerate tone, he effectively calmed down his emotions. He took the opportunity to put his arm around the woman's waist and pulled her into his arms. Only if I can get your approval. I've already approved of you. After the exhibition. I'll still be at your service, sir. She nodded gently. Yorko began to like this place a little. He moved his eyes to the stage. 2 rounds of bidding had passed, but he did not even pay attention to what was being sold. The crowd around him did not respond well either, so it was obvious that it was not a good thing. This was similar to the exhibition that Denise had taken him to. The first few rounds were usually just appetizers, and the middle and later rounds were the main points. According to Otto's judgment, the witch's ranking this time shouldn't be too low. It should be around 700 or 800 gold royals. After all, for these businessmen, pure beauty was no longer of much interest to them. What they needed was excitement and novelty. It was not until the first living person was pushed onto the stage that there was a slight noise in the crowd. It was a woman. She looked ordinary, and apart from her good complexion, there was nothing special about her. In addition, Yorko noticed that unlike the slave market, where the goods for sale were usually stripped naked, she was wrapped tightly from head to toe. She wore a gorgeous robe that only the nobles could afford. She was dressed like a lady from a rich family. What kind of trick is this? He pinched number 76's waist. Disguising slaves as nobles can raise the auction price. Not to disguise the slaves as nobles, but the slaves of nobles, the guide corrected him with a smile. Is there a difference between the two? Wait. Yorko suddenly widened his eyes. What did you say? She is a nobleman. Number 76 made a gesture to whisper, not a distant relative or a branch, but a direct descendant of a big family, the legal heir. Sirs, do you see this young lady? The host said loudly, Avni Tanfakan, the daughter of the Earl from the gravel forest of the Kingdom of Wolfheart. Of course, since her father died in the war with the church, according to the law, she is the new Earl of Gravel Forest. The Tanfakan family can be traced back to 300 years ago, and they are also quite famous in the Kingdom of Wolfheart. However, compared to the family history, I believe that the incident of the Emerald Stone 20 years ago is more memorable. Now is a good opportunity to repay the Tanfakan family. The lowest price is 300 golden dragon. Interested parties, please bid. 310. Someone immediately shouted 350 golden dragon. I bid 400. You are crazy. Looking at the rising price, Yorko said in disbelief, selling real nobles as slaves. No matter in which country, this is an unforgivable felony. There was an unwritten rule among the nobles that the continuation of the bloodline was more important than anything else, and anyone who hindered it was the common enemy of the nobles. Therefore, it became a tacit rule to pay ransom after losing the war. Even if they temporarily lost power, as long as the bloodline could continue, they could rise again at any time, especially the royal nobles, which had not changed for hundreds of years. This exhibition was a blatant challenge to the entire noble class. As long as it's not publicized, number 76 spread out her hands and said, people won't blame black money for the extinction of the nobles. After all, it was the church that caused all this. What will happen to these nobles in the end? You said they will repay, right? The guide could not help but burst into laughter. At that time, the Tanfakan family maliciously lowered the price of the emerald stone, which made many gem merchants suffer. Of course, the repayment will be cruel. But from the beginning, they are destined to never see the light of day again, and they are no different from witches. The next few bidders were all nobles from the Kingdom of Everwinter and the Kingdom of Wolfheart. There were both men and women, and the male servants were older and more popular. Compared to the heirs, the merchant women probably preferred the real nobles with rich experience. Yorko finally understood what Otto meant by inconvenient to see the light of day, and the reason why the audit was so strict. Perhaps, in addition to wealth and family background, the intention to buy was also very important. In other words, the people who could be brought in by black money were all potential buyers, and they were all in the same boat. In the 10th round of bidding, Yorko's target of this trip finally appeared. He had to admit that even though she was tightly bound, her appearance was still better than that of the noble women in the previous rounds. Her long brown hair was scattered messily on her shoulders, and her coarse linen clothes were somewhat thin in this season. Several whip marks could be seen on her bare hands and feet. Obviously, she had suffered a lot after being caught. Although she looked a little haggard, her beautiful facial features and lively temperament could not be concealed. A refugee witch from the Kingdom of Wolfheart. She doesn't have a name, and her ability is to use the power of the devil to heal herself. Thank you for your report. This kind of opportunity is rare. Think about it, there are many ways to play with a witch who can continuously recover her body. If you think raising a witch is troublesome, black money, can also do it for you. The lowest price is 500 golden dragon. Interested parties, please bid. The host shouted. 510, 560. 600 golden dragon. Yorko did not immediately bid. He knew that only when the price was close to stabilizing would the number he shouted have the final effect. However, something unexpected happened. The final price of 800 golden dragon that Otto had predicted was quickly exceeded. Soon, the bidding broke through the 1,000 mark, and there was no sign of it stopping. Chapter 653. The problem might lie in the witch's ability. Yorko realized that the eldest son of the Luashi family had only heard about the sale of the witch, but had neglected the factor of the witch's ability. The dangerous and strange ability would obviously lower the price of the witch. After all, no one wanted to lose their life because of a careless mistake. After all, the witches were all extraordinary people. Whether they were the devil's minions or not, it would always be risky to play with them. However, the witch's ability did not sound scary. The self-healing ability could not hurt others and could satisfy the needs of some curiosity hunters, so the price was much higher than expected. Sir, won't you bid? Number 76 took the initiative to speak for the first time. Wait. Yorko wiped the sweat off his hands. Although Otto said that the black letter was money, how much was it worth? 1,000 golden dragon or 2,000? Would black money recognize the price if the limit was exceeded? What if he had to pay for the gap? A series of questions poured into his mind, making it difficult for him to breathe. He could not even take out 100 golden dragon, let alone 1,000. At this time, the bidding had gradually stabilized. The limit of each increase was about 10 golden dragon, and the interval was getting slower and slower. 1,260. Is there any higher price? Yorko knew that he would lose the chance to win the witch if he did not say anything. He gritted his teeth. If the price exceeded the limit, he would show his identity as the ambassador of Greycastle. They would not hurt an ambassador and wait until the next morning for Otto to pay. 1,500 golden dragon, he said in a low voice. Yes. Number 76 immediately raised her right hand. 1,500. There was a burst of discussion among the audience. It was obvious that Yorko was determined to win the witch by raising the price by nearly 300. This way of bidding not only showed the attitude of the seller, but also gave other bidders a way out. After all, those who could get the invitation letter of black money were the group of people who were at the peak of wealth or power. Maintaining a good relationship was more important than a purely playful commodity. If it was not something irreplaceable, generally people would not continue to compete. This was also the bidding method that Yorko learned from Denise. He hoped to use this method to make other bidders back off. But his hope was soon disappointed. 1,800. In less than a few breaths of time, a new bid sounded from the crowd. Yorko's heart suddenly sank. This meant that the other party was just as determined to get it as he was. Your Excellency. Number 76 reminded. 2,000. Yorko gritted his teeth. 2,300. Not long after the guide bid, the other side continued to raise the price. Damn it, even if it was for the self-healing ability, the price was too ridiculous. In the slave market, a beautiful and skillful female slave would not be worth more than 100 golden dragons. He could buy a dozen of them and do whatever he wanted without worrying about violating the laws of the Kingdom of Dawn. Wasn't it more suitable than a witch? He also noticed that the guide for the other party was a man. The guide is determined according to the bidder's gender, right? Yorko said angrily, so that guy is a woman? She doesn't have the skills I have, so why would she buy a witch to look at? Unless the customer has special needs, it will be as you said. Number 76 nodded and said, do you want to continue to increase the price? 200 every time, until she gives up. At this point, Yorko was ready to risk everything. He did not believe that the other party could be more powerful than the three big families of the Kingdom of Dawn. Anyway, it was Otto who asked him to do it. As the two people competed with each other, the people around them began to whisper to each other. Obviously, they were very interested in this good show. When the price soared to 4,000, the other party finally stopped bidding. But the price was 5 times higher than Otto's expectation, 4,000 going once. Twice. The host's unhurried tone made Yorko extremely worried. He wished he could rush up and hit the small hammer to decide the price on behalf of the host. Fortunately, the nightmarish bid did not come again. 3 times. Sold. Yorko heaved a sigh of relief and leaned against the bench. His back was a little wet. 4,000 golden dragons. It was a fortune that he could never touch in his life, but now he was willing to spend it all for a witch. Was this how the nobles spent their money? He suddenly felt that his days in King's City were all in vain. The so-called enjoying the scenery was just a joke in the eyes of the big families and rich businessmen. Congratulations, Your Excellency. The guide said with a smile, item number 10 is yours. The people around him also looked at him with respect. No matter what, it was worthy of respect to spend 4,000 golden dragons for a short-term consumable item. In the Kingdom of Dawn, wealth was a symbol of status. Ignoring the anxiety and worry during the bidding process, Yorko now felt as sweet as honey. For the first time, he tasted the feeling of being the center of attention. It was not the contempt or perfunctory attitude that he was used to, but the attention of a big shot. Are the next auction items all slaves? Yorko asked after he savored it enough. Not the last one, number 76 replied. I heard it's a very rare treasure that Black Money spent a lot of effort to get. Even you don't know? The boss said it would be more mysterious, she said helplessly. He only told us that it was a relic with a magic stone embedded in it. So it can shine. Yorko twitched his mouth. You said there was no magic stone on the list. There are more than one kind of magic stone. Some stones can't shine, but they're the best jewels, number 76 explained. For example, the blue star, which was auctioned at 3,400 golden dragons half a year ago, is a magic stone that can't shine. But if you put it in the dark, you can see that there are countless stars twinkling inside it. It's not comparable to ordinary jewels. The price was also higher than that of ordinary jewels. Yorko could not help but be curious about how beautiful it was that it could be sold at such a high price. Since he had done what Otto asked him to do, he would just take it as a learning experience, so that he could brag about it in front of Denise in the future. He finally waited for the last round of bidding, but the result was disappointing. It was a long sword. There were indeed 4 bright-colored gems inlaid on the hilt, but was the seller selling gems or weapons? The auctioneer boasted that it was found in an ancient relic in the impassable mountain range, and the murals around it showed that the long sword once belonged to an outstanding warrior. In her hands, the long sword could even trigger celestial phenomena, and her enemies were demons from hell. Yorko sneered at the auctioneer. Maybe it's more practical to remove the gems and sell them separately. Obviously, the auctioneer made a mistake by using the slogan on the weapon. The starting price of 50,000 golden dragons made the audience burst into an uproar. In the end, no one bid, so the auction ended hastily. Where's the witch I bought? Yorko's mind was no longer on the exhibition. He touched number 76's thigh and asked in a low voice, has she been put in my room? Chapter 654. Leaving the dark karst cave, the guide held Yorko's hand and walked to a small hole on the side wall with ease. Yorko could not even see the ground clearly, but number 76's footsteps were not slow at all. Moreover, he could feel that number 76's strength was not much weaker than his. There were a few raised calluses on her palms, which did not match her slender figure at all. Besides serving the guests, the underground exhibition also used her as a guard. It was not easy to train such a person. It would be great if he could buy one from Black Money. Hill Fox looked smart and capable, but after all, he was an old friend and would certainly not follow him forever. Moreover, he was a man, so it would be a little boring to be a guard. Obviously, it would be much more suitable for him to be number 76. Of course, Yorko was just thinking about it. After all, the black letter did not belong to him. 4,000 golden dragons had far exceeded Otto's expectation. If he added some for his own use, he was afraid that the Luashi family, one of the 3 big families, would immediately fall out with him, which would not be worth the loss. After entering those small holes, Yorko found that most of them were naturally formed channels. Due to the narrow terrain, the light of the torch was much brighter. Moreover, there were many shafts on the top of the cave, through which he could vaguely see the sky under the curtain of night. These crisscrossed paths led to the deeper karst caves. Some of them had been transformed into hotels, while others had signs with wine barrels on them. It looked like an underground town. It seemed that it was necessary to arrange a guide for the customers, otherwise it would take a long time just to find his room. By the way, how should I pay for the auction? Yorko asked in a low voice when there was no one around. After you confirm that the goods are safe, just give me the invitation letter before you leave the underground, number 76 answered with a smile. I'll handle the rest of the procedures for you. You can also visit our tavern, casino, and hot water baths. Whether it's for fun or relaxation, Black Money has the corresponding services. All the money will be recorded in the black letter. Yes. What if someone wants to buy a guide? You only need to pay 500 golden dragon to the Black Money, number 76 answered smoothly as if she was used to this kind of question. Sir, do you want to buy me? Getting along isn't about the time, but the degree of pleasure. Yorko avoided the topic. What do you think? You're right. She couldn't help but chuckle. By the way, can I see your face? That won't do. Number 76 shook her head. Unless you buy the guide, he can't take off his mask in private. This is the rule of Black Money. But you said that any service is fine, of course. She touched her red lips, her words full of provocation. It doesn't stop me from dressing you, my lord. Yorko felt even more excited. Here we are. This is your room. Passing through many caves, number 76 led him to a wooden door embedded in the end of the cave. The door was engraved with the same number as her. The room is divided into 2 rooms. I'll sleep in the outer room tonight. You can call me if you need anything. After the door was opened, Yorko could not help but raise his eyebrows. This is the outer room. The karst cave behind the door was narrow at the front and wide at the back. The so-called outer room was only the length and width of one person. There was only a layer of straw on the ground. It was probably no different from a stable when sleeping. After all, it's underground. It's difficult to find so many suitable rooms. The guide waved his hand indifferently and then opened the second door for him. The inner room was not very spacious. Except for a big bed and 2 soft chairs, there was basically no room for anything else. Ooh! Ooh! Yorko walked into the room and saw the witch he bought at a glance. Her hands and feet were firmly fastened to the iron ring on the wall, and a piece of white silk was stuffed in her mouth. Seeing someone come in, she immediately panicked and struggled. The corner of his mouth twitched twice, and he immediately cursed Black Money in his heart. He thought that the residence would be divided into several compartments, and there would be a cage specially used to imprison slaves, but it turned out to be so simple and crude. How could he enjoy a long night with number 76? Perform a live erotic show in front of the witch? Spare him. This kind of behavior was probably worse than directly touching her. Yorko's frown deepened when he thought that Otto had asked him to gain the witch's trust as much as possible. Does Black Money have other rooms? I mean the ones that cost extra, he asked helplessly. Considering that some guests have higher requirements for bedrooms, we have semi-outdoor rooms closer to the ground and rooms close to the underground dark spring. Sure enough, when businessmen made money, it was simply outrageous. What's the cheapest one? 3 golden dragon for 1 night. Yorko thought that the price was almost enough to stay in a hotel in the inner city of the king's city for half a month. However, compared to 4,000 gold royals, this amount was not worth mentioning at all. Otto Luashi would just treat it as a service charge and would probably not mind. Go out and wait for me for a while, he said after thinking for a moment. I have something to talk with this witch. I'll call you when I'm done. Yes, sir. Number 76 respectfully left the room. Yorko took off his coat and walked to the witch. The latter struggled more violently, with panic and fear in her eyes. He sighed and covered the witch with his coat. Listen, I'm asked to come here to get you out of here. No one will hurt you. As long as you don't make a fuss, everything is negotiable. Nod twice if you understand. The witch stopped struggling and stared at Yorko for a long time, as if she could not believe what she had heard. The ambassador had to repeat it again, speaking as slowly as possible. Although the witch was very beautiful, he did not like this kind of childish little girl. This time, she finally nodded. Yorko was relieved and reached out to pull the cloth out of the witch's mouth. Who are you? She asked after coughing twice. A person who came to save you. Yorko returned to the bed and sat down. Do you have a name? Amy. She paused. Since you came to save me, why don't you let me go? What if you run away? If you're caught, I don't have another 4,000 golden dragon to buy you again. Yorko spread his hands and said, for safety's sake, you'd better stay confined and not easily arouse suspicion. When we get out of here tomorrow, I'll set you free. What do you think? Really? Amy asked doubtfully. She trusted others so easily. No wonder she was found and reported. He thought to himself, fortunately, I met her this time. She's lucky. Not only that, I'll also introduce you to a place where witches gather. There are many companions waiting for you there, so you don't have to hide all day. Yorko stood up. So just wait until tomorrow. Do you understand? Wait, where are you going? To enjoy the sweet nightlife, of course. He grinned. Just when Yorko was about to call number 76, there was a sudden sound of messy footsteps in the outer room, followed by the dull sound of heavy objects hitting each other. Everything came and went quickly. Only a few breaths later, the room was quiet again. Chapter 655. Damn it. Yorko did not know what was going on outside, but he knew it was not a good thing. Black Money was an exhibition organized by the most powerful local businessmen. Except for the illegal auction items, everything else was the same as a regular exhibition. He cursed Otto 10,000 times in his heart. First, the auction price was wrong, and now someone came to him. If he had known this, he would not have agreed to it. Yorko looked around, trying to find something to defend himself with, but there was nothing in the room except some tools for torturing the slaves. Just then, the door of the inner room was pushed open and a figure flashed in. Yorko knelt down without hesitation. Spare me. I'll give you whatever you want. But the person didn't stop at all. Instead, he leaped and pounced towards him. Oh no. He subconsciously held his head and fell to one side, hoping to avoid the attack. No, Annie. Amy shouted at the same time. Following the witch's voice, the cold wind that swept his cheeks suddenly stopped. Yorko looked sideways and found that it was a wooden stick, which seemed to be broken from a chair. If he were to be hit, he would probably be knocked unconscious immediately, which would be considered a light punishment. Then, he was grabbed by the arm by a big hand, lifted up, and pressed on the bed with his back to her. Didn't he do anything to you? The voice sounded a little hoarse, and it was difficult to tell whether it was a man or a woman. He said, he came to save me. You've been cheated again, Amy. The person shook her head, twisted Yorko's hands behind his back, and tied them up skillfully. Spending 4,000 golden dragons to save a strange witch? This is not a small sum of money. Even your father would need to save up his entire life to accumulate so many gold royals. Is that so? He knew the auction price so well. Was he really the guy who competed with him? But at that time, the karst cave was dark except for the bright booth. How did this guy recognize him and follow him to room 76? Yorko knew that his life was at stake. This time, he did not lobby for his old friend or Otto, but to save himself. I didn't lie to her. I'm the ambassador of Greycastle, and it's the king's order to save the witch. Greycastle's ambassador. Yorko knew it would work when he felt the hand on his back tremble slightly. Yes, you've heard of Roland Wimbledon, haven't you? He's the fourth son of Wimbledon III, the king of Greycastle, and he's very friendly to witches. He firmly believes that witches are no different from ordinary people. He even fought with the church to let witches live freely in his territory. It's all true, I swear. The visitor might not know who Roland was, but everyone in the city of Glow knew that the church and Greycastle had suffered a crushing defeat at Coldwind Ridge. He even knew that the news was spread by Hill Fox and his helpers. The church had always been the #1 enemy of the witches. Those who could defeat the church, no matter for what reason, would most likely win the goodwill and respect of the witches. As expected, the hand on his back loosened a lot. He was then turned over and pulled up from the bed. Yorko finally saw the face of the person who attacked him. The person, who was called Annie, was probably a woman. Even though she was covered by a long robe, her body was shockingly tall and sturdy. Her appearance was incomparably heroic. Two sword-like eyebrows were slightly tilted upwards, her eyes were long and narrow, and her hair was pulled back into a ponytail, revealing her smooth forehead. If her voice was a little lower, he would believe that she was a man, but her appearance was somewhat enviable. In that case, why didn't you unlock Amy? This question again. Yorko had to repeat what he said before. I did it for her safety. It would be more dangerous if she didn't believe me and sneaked out. Where are you going to take her? Annie was obviously not as easy to coax as Amy. She did not comment on Yorko's words. Are you going to give her to the king of Greycastle? Of course, no, he corrected himself in the middle of his sentence. My old friend doesn't treat the witches as slaves. There are many witches living in his domain, just like normal people. Moreover, they have formed an organization to protect the rights of their own kind. Enough. Annie interrupted him sharply. Yorko immediately shut his mouth. He had heard about these things when he was chatting with Hill. He heard that when the demonic plague broke out in the king's city, His Majesty relied on the power of the witch union to contain the plague released by the church. This was obviously a good thing, but he did not know why Annie's face became very gloomy. It sounds like the Blood Fong Association. Annie's voice turned cold. They used to advertise themselves like this. Blood, what? Yorko was startled and had a bad feeling in his heart. Witches can only believe in themselves, not the promises of the nobles. She glanced around the room and quickly found the key hanging on the wall. Wait, you want to take her away? We're underground. As you saw when you came in, the karst cave was full of guards. How are you going to get out? I have my own way. You don't need to worry about it. Annie unlocked the lock and put Amy down. She then grabbed Yorko and locked one of his feet on the anklet. You really don't want to think about it? Yorko became a little braver when he saw that Annie did not seem to want to kill him. He obediently let Annie do what she wanted and made a final attempt. It's more appropriate for me to take her out. I'll hand her over to you after we get out of the courtyard. In this way, it won't easily arouse suspicion and won't leave any traces. It sounds really good, but it's also possible that I'll be greeted by swords and god's stones when I get out. Annie remained unmoved. I once made a big mistake because I was too gullible. I won't make the same mistake again. After Yorko was secured, she dragged number 76 in. She also tied her hands behind her back and locked one of her feet. You didn't kill her. Number 76's head was stained with blood. Apparently, she had been badly beaten. She was still in a coma, but judging from the slight rise and fall of her chest, she was still alive. It's not too late to kill her after I save Amy. You too. Annie's words made Yorko tremble. But I won't kill you now for the sake of the King of Greycastle defeating the church. Maybe we all owe him a thank you, but it doesn't mean that I'll unconditionally trust him. I'll bring this to His Majesty. In addition, if you encounter any difficulties, you can come to the residence of the ambassador to ask for my help. Of course, it's better if you don't come. We can all save a lot of effort. Yorko thought it was better this way. He had tried his best anyway. He could not force them to go to Greycastle. Even his old friends could not blame him. Chapter 656. Hey, are you okay? Yorko nudged number 76 with his other foot, but she did not respond. He sighed and moved closer to her. Then he picked up the coat that had fallen on the ground with his mouth and covered both of them. Forget about romance, let's just sleep like this for one night. After experiencing so many twists and turns, he found himself unexpectedly calm. The underground auction, spending a lot of money, being the center of attention, and the witch's night attack. In just one night, he had experienced something that he had not experienced for more than 20 years. And this thrilling feeling was not as bad as he had imagined. Of course, if Yorko were to experience it again, he would never agree to it. After a sleepless night, it was already noon the next day when the people of the exhibition found them in a daze. Yorko was then quickly moved to a spacious and comfortable room. Not only did servants bring him soft bread and freshly squeezed juice, but also maids checked him from head to toe, including the area between his legs. At his request, Otto Luashi, who had been waiting anxiously outside, was also taken into the karst cave. What happened? Otto asked eagerly as soon as he saw the ambassador. I heard that you were injured. You can leave now. After dismissing the servants sent by Black Money, Yorko told them the whole story. You've really put me in a bad situation. I almost lost my life. Fortunately, they didn't kill me for my kindness and care for the witches in the auction. If it had been someone else, he would have become a cold corpse. Complaining was his specialty in Greycastle King City for many years. Even if he could not get any practical benefits, he could at least earn some guilt or sympathy, which might be useful in the future. And judging from Otto's appearance, he was sure that he would not be indifferent. As expected, the latter looked very uneasy. This is my negligence. I'll make it up to you when we go back. What about the 4,000 golden dragon coins? The witches escape from your room, which is under the jurisdiction of Black Money. They probably won't deduct the bidding fee. Didn't you save a lot of money? Yorko teased. You saved the witches and didn't waste the black letter. The black letter will be remade every time the exhibition is held, so it's not exactly wasteful. Otto smiled helplessly. But the golden dragon has been saved. Yorko suddenly remembered what number 76 had said in his ear. You only need to pay Black Money 500 golden dragon. Sir, do you want to buy me? Compared to 4,500 was not that much of an exaggeration. Perhaps he could ask Otto to be generous this time. Just take it as compensation for the fright. Yorko cleared his throat and was about to speak when the bedroom door was pushed open. A man wearing a silver mask walked in accompanied by 2 attendants. It was obvious that he was quite old. His dark brown hair was mixed with many silver strands. He was wearing a loose silk robe, and the pitch-black dragon head logo on his chest was particularly eye-catching. I'm the person in charge of this round of the exhibition. You can call me Silver Mask. He bowed slightly. Black Money apologizes for what happened to you. Fortunately, you weren't hurt in this accident. We've launched an investigation into the witch's escape and will inform you as soon as we have any news. The auction price won't be deducted from the black letter unless we can catch the witches and you still need her by then. Ahem. I understand. Yorko coughed twice. After all, it was still him who wanted to buy the witches, not Ado Luashi, so he had to continue the show. Don't hand her over to anyone except me. The 10th round of the auction will always be valid. As you wish. By the way, how did the people who attacked me get into the exhibition? These murderers kidnapped other visitors. We've found 2 other victims who were robbed of their black letters in a house in the suburbs, Silver Mask replied. More than one person? Yes, this was a premeditated action. He nodded. We didn't expect the witches to have other accomplices. In other words, we didn't expect them to have the guts to attack when the King of Dawn was searching for them. Did the person who threatened you leave any clues? No, she ran away when she heard that I was the ambassador of Greycastle. Yorko spread his hands. Hasn't Black Money thought of changing to a more reliable audit method? I suppose it's not the first time that people can enter just by relying on an invitation, right? You're absolutely right, a burst of laughter came from under the silver mask. But this is also the charm of Black Money. Compared to the risk, people prefer to be able to bid for their favorite goods without revealing their identity. Of course, when we issue the black letter, we carefully consider each target, including the importance of the black letter and the ability to keep it safe. No matter who the black letter came from, the 2 victims definitely won't have another chance to get an invitation. Well. Yorko shrugged. So how did she escape from the underground? I remember there are many guards on the passage from the karst cave to the courtyard. It's impossible for her to run out with a burden. Could the criminals who sneaked in still be hiding somewhere in the underground cave, waiting for you to let your guard down? Silver Mask shook his head. They crawled out through the air vents. Several iron fences were burned through, which should be caused by the witch's ability. Is this the escape route that Annie prepared in advance? And more than one which participated in this rescue. It seems that Otto's efforts were in vain. In this case, there's no other way. Yorko pretended to change the subject inadvertently. I wonder how my guide is doing. She'll be severely punished by the Black Money. Protecting the distinguished guests is also a guide's responsibility. She's no longer qualified to take this position. Can I see her? Do you mean, you want to punish her personally? No. Yorko glanced at Otto. I want to buy her. But she's already a sinner of Black Money. Silver Mask said hesitantly, 500 golden dragon. Let's pay with the black letter. Wait. Mr. Ambassador. Otto was surprised. What guide? Yorko pressed Otto's hand and did not answer. Silver Mask was silent for a while and then nodded. I see. If you insist, we'll give number 76 to you as a gift. As a gift? Yorko was stunned at first, then he was delighted. Chapter 657. Holding the stone of lighting, Banach Lothar walked step by step to the deepest part of the Black Money. It was a steep slope. Even with the help of his servants, he still found it difficult to walk. I'm old after all. He felt sad. At the age of 20, he took over the family business from his father. Today, he had built the Chamber of Commerce into a behemoth with wealth comparable to that of a country. Only he knew the struggle and excitement during this period. Even though the title of Sir was only an honorary one, his reputation and status in the Kingdom of Dawn were not much lower than that of the 3 families of Radiant Light. But great achievements did not mean that they could be passed on to future generations. In fact, as the scale of the Chamber of Commerce continued to expand, its foundation was in jeopardy. In order to consolidate the strength of the Chamber of Commerce, many influential businessmen and even upper-class nobles joined it. When he was alive, they were either reliable arms or valuable pawns. But what about after he died? Would they still be willing to stay in their current positions? This question hardly needed to be answered. Banach had 5 sons and 1 daughter. Among them, the most outstanding son, Victor Lothar, was only 21 years old. Although he had shown extraordinary talent in business, he could not suppress his cunning partners at such a young age. The Chamber of Commerce was not the private property of the Lothar family. If he forced Victor to take over his position, he was afraid that he would suffer a strong backlash. At that time, it was not a big deal for the Chamber of Commerce to be torn apart, but his children might be in danger. But to give away the behemoth that he had worked hard to build in his life? Banach was really unwilling to do so. As he was thinking, he suddenly slipped. "Sir, be careful." The servants beside him immediately held him. Banach adjusted his body several times before he regained his footing. Obviously, this body no longer had the vigor of youth. He was already 69 years old. How many times could he repeat such a steep slope? He had to hurry. At the thought of the promise given by the oracle, Banach's heart was rekindled. Only by becoming one of them could he solve this seemingly unsolvable problem once and for all. The downslope gradually became flat, and the surrounding air began to become humid. Banach faintly heard the sound of the underground undercurrent hitting the stone wall, which was like continuous thunder, dull and vigorous. To be honest, he didn't like this kind of place. Although it was secluded enough, it didn't give people a sense of security. He was always worried that one day the water would break down the walls of the cave and swallow this place completely. In fact, many similar situations had already occurred in this group of caves. There were quite a few passages that had turned into deep pools due to the backflow of underground water. In the end, they had no choice but to be sealed. Black money only occupied a small part of the karst caves. If Banach was given enough time, he could even build an underground city here. When they reached the bottom of the slope, the light suddenly dimmed. It was not that the stone of lighting had dimmed, but the space around them had suddenly expanded several times, and the light could no longer illuminate the stone walls on both sides. The sound of the underground water flow became very loud, as if a branch was passing under their feet. In the pitch-black cave, 2 balls of yellow light were flickering in the distance. They were the guards sent by the oracle to receive him. "All right, you guys can send me here. But Your Excellency, there's still a long way ahead." The servant said worriedly. "It doesn't matter. I'll walk the last part of the road by myself," Banach said slowly. The two did not dare to say another word due to the power he had accumulated over the years. "Yes, please be careful, Your Excellency." Leaving the cave entrance, he carefully walked to the center of the karst cave. This cave at the bottom of the karst cave group was very strange. It was shaped like an isolated island, surrounded by bottomless ravines. The protruding rock mountain in the center and the slope were only connected by a narrow stone bridge. When he walked on the bridge, he was surrounded by darkness, and the magic stone could only illuminate a few meters under his feet. If it were not for the yellow light on the opposite side, Banach would even have the illusion that he was walking in the abyss of hell, and the roaring water under his feet was the hissing of ghosts and evil spirits. A thin mist gradually rose around him, and the range of light was further reduced. It was formed by excessive water vapor. He knew that he had to be very careful. The bridge was likely to be covered with moss. If he slipped off the stone bridge, even the oracle could not save him. Facing the moist air, Banach Lothar finally arrived at the central rock island. Before he could take 2 breaths, the oracle's guard had turned around and walked backward. "Follow me. Your Excellency has been waiting for you for a long time." Having no time to complain, he took a deep breath and followed the two. The peak of this isolated island-like rocky mountain was no more than 100 paces in radius. It wasn't very big, and the place to meet the oracle was located inside the mountain. Before stepping on the stone stairs around the mountain, Banach noticed that there was an extremely wide cave behind the karst cave. It was connected with the slope that he came from and formed a straight line. However, it was much closer to the rock mountain and also much larger. The cave wall was a standard circle, and the edge that the magic stone could illuminate was very smooth, as if it was artificially carved. If he guessed right, the oracle's guard must have entered the kingdom of dawn through this underground passage. After entering the rock mountain, Banach was so tired that he almost could not stand. Fortunately, the oracle did not care about the posture when they met. The guard brought a soft cushion and let him sit in the 1-square-foot stone room. Then he put down the heavy curtain to isolate the sound of water outside. "Are you ready?" one of them asked. "Yes, please summon your excellency." Banach wiped the fine sweat on his forehead. Although he was exhausted, his heart was full of expectation. As soon as he finished speaking, the magic stone of lighting in his hand suddenly flashed. Not only his, but also the magic stones of the other 2 guards. Then the 3 light sources went out one by one, and the stone room was shrouded in pitch-black darkness. As it was not the first time that Banach had seen such a scene, he was not surprised. Instead, he was full of admiration and awe for the power of the oracle. Soon, a purple light curtain rose from the ground, turning the surrounding darkness into a different scene. It was also deep in the ground, but red lava flowed below. Numerous rivers of fire gushed out of the holes in the rock wall and converged at the lower part, forming a cobweb-like picture. Above the illumination of the flames was the oracle's torso, a huge sarcoma with countless roots like a plant hanging on the rock wall. The tangled epidermis pulsed rhythmically, as if it was breathing hot air. It had neither eyes nor mouth, but it could see and talk to him, directly through his consciousness, echoing in his mind. This was the true appearance of the oracle. It did not need to transform into a human form because it itself was extraordinary. Chapter 658. No need to be so polite, the female voice appeared directly in his mind. "What's the situation up there?" He did not need to speak either. He only needed to think the answer in his mind. It was difficult to adapt to this kind of communication at first, but after mastering it, communication became very smooth. Of course, it was also more difficult to lie. "Oracle, something unexpected happened." They didn't accept the invitation of the ambassador of Greycastle. Banach repeated the whole story. "It was my mistake. I didn't expect them to be so vigilant. A plan that calculates people's minds is easy to fail." The oracle's tone did not sound dissatisfied, but was mixed with an inexplicable nostalgia. "Do you have any remedial measures?" "As long as they have to accept the invitation," he paused. "Take advantage of His Majesty Apan Moya's new policy." Tisk. Mortals. Banach could not help but be stunned. "My lord? I don't like this witch elimination policy. Can you guarantee that no one will get hurt?" "This. Not to mention getting hurt, it would be normal if some of the witches were captured and executed. After all, the purpose of the plan was to let the witches set off to the south and go to the western region of Greycastle. As for those who survived, there was no requirement." "Is this what you think?" The oracle's voice suddenly rose a few octaves, the wriggling tentacles on its body and the surging lava under the ground showed its anger. "Don't forget what I said, in the face of doomsday, every witch is important." "No, my lord, I bear in mind every word you said," Banach said to himself. He was communicating with the oracle through his mind, and any thoughts would be conveyed to the oracle. "I naturally hope that no innocent people will be hurt, but that will take more time, and the manpower will need to be rearranged. Not everyone has the courage to go against the royal family and at the same time keep the secret." "Let my guards help you," the oracle quickly replied. "How long will it take?" Banach was relieved. He had seen the ability of these guards. An ordinary knight was no match for them, and the weaker ones could not even see their movements. If 2 or 3 of them fought side by side, they could easily resist 10 times their number of knight, which was enough to show that the oracle was extraordinary. The third step of the plan should be completed within 2 weeks. "Then let's do it." "Lord Oracle." Banach hesitated. "Are witches really so important? Would God only favor them? In terms of wealth or power, I'm more suitable, a more suitable chosen one." The oracle interrupted him. "You don't know what you're talking about. Neither wealth nor power means anything at the end of the world. God was looking for a savior who could use his great power, not a spokesperson for the secular world. You are indeed very useful, mortal, so when the task is completed, I will give you a suitable reward, such as immortality, but you must also know your place. Banach knew what the doomsday referred to. Every 400 years, a blood-red moon would appear in the sky, and the gates of hell would open accordingly. The devils would swarm out of it, and a massacre would soon sweep the entire continent. Those who could resist these ferocious aliens were called the Chosen Ones. Now he had a better understanding of the Chosen Ones. The person the oracle was looking for seemed to have a direct connection with the power of God, and she must be a witch. But he was still a little reluctant. Will there definitely be a chosen one among the witches in Grey Castle? The oracle fell into a rare silence. After a while, the voice sounded again. No one knows the answer. This is just an attempt, and such an attempt has been going on for hundreds of years. What if you can't find it? Then keep looking until the end of the world destroys everything. If everyone died, then immortality would be meaningless. It seemed that he had to beg God to let him find something on this trip. Banach smiled bitterly. I see. I'll try my best to do this. The tentacles on the sarcoma wriggled neatly, which was a sign of satisfaction. There's one more thing, is the church really defeated? Since the news of the church's defeat reached the Kingdom of Dawn, the oracle had been particularly concerned about it. He even asked Banach to personally send someone to Coldwind Ridge to verify whether the news was true. It's true. The foot of Coldwind Ridge looks like it has been trampled by demonic beasts. There are deep pits and ravines everywhere, and there are thousands of graves around. According to the locals, this was all done by the king of Grey Castle. All his dead were brought back to the western region of the kingdom, while the dead of the church were burned and buried on the spot. In addition, the merchants who came back from the Hermes Plateau also said that the whole holy city was dead silent, completely devoid of the prosperous atmosphere of the past. Is this their end? The oracle's voice suddenly became very light, but it returned to normal in a blink of an eye. Let's call it a day. I'm tired. Yes, Your Excellency. Banach bowed and said. The scene in the lava receded like the tide, and darkness soon swept over. Then the magic stone flashed a few times and lit up the stone room again. Everything was like a dream. The medicine this time. A guard handed over a porcelain bottle. Drink it. The oracle is very satisfied with your recent performance. Thank you, the oracle, for your reward. Banach took the porcelain bottle excitedly and drank the liquid in the bottle. Suddenly, a burning warm current rose from his stomach, making his whole body regain strength, and his hands and feet seemed to be much more flexible. Unfortunately, the effect of the medicine could not be maintained for a long time, nor could it prolong his life. According to the oracle, in addition to relieving fatigue and restoring physical strength in a short time, it also had a certain strengthening effect on the body. Before being granted immortality, he needed to repair his broken body bit by bit in order to withstand the severe pain of the transformation. Otherwise, the power would tear him apart. It was these words that made Banach believe in the oracle. If the oracle was a liar, just taking out this medicine that could rejuvenate the body would be enough to make a large number of nobles and rich merchants completely fall for it. Why would it be necessary to tell the oracle the function and nature of the medicine? 3 years ago, he could only move in a wheelchair pushed by a servant. Now, he could at least stand and walk on his own feet, relying on the oracle's secret medicine. If he could fulfill the oracle's request and further obtain immortality, all the problems that troubled him would be easily solved. Banach lifted the curtain and walked to the stone stairs around the mountain with his head held high. Chapter 659. Roland made himself a cup of tea and looked at Nightingale. Do you want it? Yes, thank you. She leaned back on the recliner, holding a dried fish in one hand and a new script written by May in the other. She was reading it with relish. Ever since Anna talked to her, Nightingale disappeared for 2 days. When she reappeared in front of Roland, she seemed to have been relieved of a heavy burden and returned to her previous carefree self. She always had a smile on her face, and she would occasionally sneak a few glances at him, her eyes full of energy. Just like how she was now. She put her feet on the coffee table without hesitation, and her robe was pulled to one side, revealing her slender legs wrapped in black stockings. She would only temporarily hide herself when someone came in. This seductive posture made Roland's eyes look to the side involuntarily. As a result, half the morning had passed, and he hadn't even finished a single drawing. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have asked Soroya to draw these thermal socks that were close to nylon material. He brought a cup of tea that emitted a pleasant fragrance to Nightingale. "This is the tea you wanted." She put down the script, took it with both hands, and sniffed hard. "Ah, it smells so good. Can you add a piece of sugar for me?" In the future, Nightingale was undoubtedly in the middle between the salty and sweet factions, and she wouldn't get fat no matter how much she ate. During the period when Roland was unconscious, she lost a lot of weight, and she lost a lot of weight. However, after he woke up, she quickly returned to normal, and there seemed to be an upper limit to her weight. After reaching this standard, it would no longer increase. In the past, Roland would nag her that eating too much would make her fat, but now he realized that she didn't need to worry about this at all. After putting a piece of sugar into her teacup, he returned to the table and drew a few more strokes. Finally, he couldn't hold back his curiosity and said, "Nightingale, Anna, what did she say to you?" "Well." She flashed and steadily appeared on the desk. "It's a secret. You can't even tell me." "It's Anna's request." Nightingale hesitated and shook her head. "If it's about me, I'll tell you whatever you want to know. But this, she asked me to keep it a secret for the time being." "Oh, okay." Roland took a sip of tea and didn't ask any more questions. Although he could go straight to Anna, anyone with a normal EQ wouldn't repeatedly mention this matter at a time like this. At least he could see that Anna wasn't angry about it. Just as he picked up the quill again, Nightingale suddenly said, "Thank you." "What?" Roland was stunned. He raised his head and met her eyes. The autumn sun dyed her long golden hair and left bright spots on her face. Her moving face was as beautiful as a painting under the warm sunlight. Time seemed to stop because of it. "Thank you for telling her my wish." In the afternoon, good news came from the Ministry of Construction. According to the new steelmaking facility drawings drawn by Roland, the first converter steel mill was completed at the foot of the North Slope mountain. Of course, rather than calling it a factory, it looked more like a simple iron shed. Inside, there was a rather large piece of new equipment. Unlike the previous furnaces, the smelting equipment was made of steel from top to bottom. The angular grate and the huge converter had been coated with a heat-resistant coating. The dull gray surface gave off a majestic and heavy feeling under the sun. When Roland arrived at the furnace area with the officials from City Hall, the new furnace was surrounded by the recruited veteran workers. Obviously, everyone was full of curiosity about it. "Your Majesty, can this furnace really be used to smelt steel? It doesn't even have a place to burn the fire." Although Lozia of the Ministry of Construction had doubted this before, he still followed the requirements of the drawings and completed the converter meticulously. Its parts were all made by Anna. With the help of Hummingbird, the time limit was shortened to 1 week. "In nature, only fire can produce heat," Roland said with a smile. "Tell the workers to prepare for the furnace test." The 3 main technologies for steelmaking were the open hearth furnace, the converter, and the electric furnace. Roland thought for a long time and chose the third one after excluding the electric furnace. Although the open hearth furnace was the simplest in structure and was closer to the traditional furnace in operation, its shortcomings were also very obvious. First of all, it required a large amount of fuel, which was very disadvantageous to the available resources of Neverwinter. After all, the coal mine was far away at the source of the Redwater River, and the coking plant had just started. It was already very difficult to meet the needs of the blast furnace. Adding an open hearth furnace to smelt steel would cause a shortage of fuel. This was also the biggest advantage of the converter, it almost did not need to consume fuel. By oxidizing the impurities such as manganese, silicon, and carbon in the pig iron, it automatically released heat and kept the temperature of the molten iron at a high level, so that the smelting reaction could continue. The second disadvantage of the open hearth furnace was that it occupied a large area and took a long time to smelt. In order to strengthen the use of fuel, the open hearth furnace needed to build a heat storage pool to preheat the air in advance, which took more than half a day to produce a furnace of molten iron. If it was a converter, the size of the furnace was the same as the size of the equipment, and the rail and molten iron transportation system could be used together. The smelting process only took dozens of minutes, and when the technology was mature, it could even be shortened to less than a quarter of an hour. In view of these two advantages, Roland chose the converter as the main steelmaking equipment in Neverwinter in the future. With the help of the steam engine, the workers quickly poured a large pile of pig iron ingots into the pear-shaped furnace. "Anna, start the fire." Anna nodded and went up the stairs to the top of the converter. She summoned the black fire to melt the iron ingots. After a while, the red-hot molten iron in the furnace shone on her face. When the production officially started, the molten iron in the steel mill would be supplied by the blast furnace, which was why he built the steel mill in the furnace area. "Follow the steps I told you," Roland said to the person in charge of the steelmaking team. "Insert the blowpipe into the mouth of the furnace." Although it was the first time for these selected veteran workers to work in the converter, they had operated similar subsystems before, so there was no essential difference between operating the blowpipe and controlling the trailer. The steam engine rumbled, and a steel pipe slowly fell from the top of the furnace into the furnace. The other end of the steel pipe was connected to a coated flexible pipe, which led to the steam engine driving the air extraction equipment. As the oxygen-rich air was sucked into the converter, the furnace mouth suddenly burst into flames. Orange sparks splashed from the furnace like blooming fireworks. The dazzling white light was so dazzling that it was almost impossible to look at it directly. This spectacular scene amazed the officials in City Hall. Facing the scorching heat wave that was blowing against his face, Roland felt incomparably satisfied. "You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.